Hello everybody, welcome on into another stream of us looking at a bunch of lore. So we have Asinex, Mortis, and Levovit here early. Welcome on in, guys. So on last night's stream, we watched like 5 videos, so there were a lot. The first one was That Dang Dad's Elden Ring is about necropolitics. Then we had Square Table Gaming's Elden Ring lore, who are the Death Knights. Followed up with the Discerning Tarnished's Radahn's Gravity lore, the secret history of the universe, explained. Then Circle Tunes HD's How One Item Fractured Elden Ring's fanbase, followed up by Major Trenton's The Problem with Souls Games, and we ended with Solving the Problem with Souls-like Games by Drew Sun. So let's go ahead and take these off the list so that way I actually remember that I watched these. And tonight I do have a number of videos queued up as usual. So the first one will be Godwyn is Not Godfrey's Son by Living Jar Cletus. Then after that I have I'm Sorry for Doubting Liza P by Lee 8. It was kind of hard to figure out what this dude's name was because L and I look very similar. So then after that, we have The Two Fingers and Elden Ring Explained, Elden Ring lore by Titan, a member of the community for quite a while now. Then we have Gaming as a Perfectionist by Daryl Talks Games. And then sadly, Level, I have yours queued up last for Why Dung Eater's Ending is the Best. Not what you think, in parentheses. So, all right. We'll go ahead and go into Living Jar Cletus's first video with Godwyn is Not Godfrey's Son.
I'm beginning to believe that
And Elden Enthusiast, how's it going? Nice to see you again. I think I have my speed set to 2. I don't even remember what I watched today on this account. Anyway. You won't be on long, but you're here for the beginning. Okay, sweet. So, I've never seen anything by this channel before, so just out of face value, this is something that I would intensely disagree with, Godwyn not being Godfrey's son, because I think that's pretty clear based off of what one believes about the golden lineage, because even though Godwyn is not explicitly stated to be part of the golden lineage, we do have the one wet nurse finger reader crone who says he's a scion of the golden bough, which to me is synonymous with the golden lineage, although I will grant that it is not one-to-one explicit there. So that's my opinion right there, Levo. I may have headed off your question as you're asking it. Hey, Floorboards, how's it going? All right, so let's go ahead and dive on in.
I'm beginning to believe that Godwyn wasn't
And then let me know how the volume is for you guys. So I did lower myself slightly because I did watch my stream a little bit at the end just to look at the sound balance, and it is just so wildly inconsistent between what OBS was showing me and what you guys are able to hear, because I would have agreed with Eugene that it was too low yesterday. You missed the hour earlier streams? Oh, because you don't go by daylight savings time? My condolences, bro.
I'm beginning to believe that Godwyn wasn't actually Godfrey's son. I've actually thought this for a while. However, before the DLC, I didn't really have a good reason. Formerly, with the knowledge that George R.R. Martin played a large part in the lore of this game.
It still seems low? Okay.
America, Godfrey, and Godwyn sort of gave off Cersei, Robert Baratheon, and Jaime Lannister vibes. Or even substitute Jaime for Joffrey. And that's...
Actually, I wonder if this is it. Hold on. Let me know if you guys notice any changes in like the next 10 seconds. I'm going to restart the video from scratch to give my guy his due. So hold on. I'm going to be adjusting my slider wildly. Let me know if you guys hear a difference. Otherwise, I might have been adjusting the wrong thing. So
pretty much it. That was pretty much the whole reason. And again, this is not a good reason for making such a bold claim, which is why I never made it.
Me messing with things.
I've taken the time to absorb the lore of this game.
So did that affect the audio at all for you guys? Because I'm kind of guessing it may not have. My Discord notification did not go off. Oh, thank you. I think I forgot to send it out, actually. Yeah, I think I was distracted. So I'll go ahead and do that now. Whoopsie. Yeah, thanks for letting me know. Okay, so that did not affect the volume. Okay. That's perfect. I mean, it's not perfect, but at least now I've identified the issue, and I can accurately adjust the volume now. So I'm going to go
game.
Look
far
at this
more
now.
in-depth
Oh yeah, I
than
could
had
see why it'd be
previously,
so low for you guys.
and especially with the
So,
release of the DLC.
I'm assuming
I
this
feel
would
like
be
this is a
about
theory
the
that can
sweet
certainly be
spots.
argued. But I'd like to start
And
this
now
video
I'll
by
go back
explaining
to the
why
beginning.
it has always been a
Okay. Hey, Adlai, how's it going? So damn it. Yeah, I just have like too many sliders for my volume settings because one is monitoring like what I'm listening to. The other is like what you guys actually hear, which I'm still technically monitoring. So, okay, hopefully that is all better now. So, it's too loud now? Okay, I can turn that down.
I'm beginning to believe that Godwyn wasn't actually Godfrey's son. I've actually thought this for a while, however,
So how is
before
that?
the DLC I didn't really have a good reason. Formerly with the knowledge that George R.R. Martin played a large part in the lore of this game, I sort of just felt like America, Godfrey, and Godwyn sort of gave off Cersei, Robert Baratheon, and Jaime Lannister vibes.
Sweet. Okay.
Or even
Thank you, guys.
substitute Jaime for Joffrey. And that's pretty much it. That was pretty much the whole reason. And again, this is not a good reason for making such a bold claim, which is why I never made it. But as I've taken the
And I could respect the self-honesty with that kind of assessment of one's own beliefs there.
time to absorb the lore of this game far more in depth than I had previously, and especially with the release of the DLC, I feel like this is a theory that can certainly be argued. But I'd like to start this video by explaining why it has always been assumed by most that Godwyn is Godfrey's son. Because for those who don't know, Godwyn is never explicitly stated in-game to be Godfrey or Marika's son. To start with the obvious, according to finger reader Enya, quote, "The demigods are each and all the direct offspring of Queen Marika." The finger reader Crone in the deep root depths states, quote, "O Lord Godwyn, such cruelty, such humiliation. My poor sweet lordling should have died a true death, as first of the demigods to die, as a martyr to destined death. But why must it yet bring such disgrace, a scion of the golden bough, sentenced to live in death?" The Prince of Death's cyst also refers to Godwyn as a scion of the golden bough. And he is obviously referred to as Godwyn the Golden many times throughout the game, by Ragier, Ronnie in the story trailer, the Remembrance of the Lich Dragon, and many more. So even though it's never explicitly stated that he is Godfrey's son, it's safe to say that he was, or was at least considered to be, a part of the Golden lineage. And the Golden lineage is said to be the descendants of Godfrey and Marika. Godric's great rune reads, "The first demigods were Elden Lord Godfrey and his offspring, the Golden lineage." So why is it that I would think that Godwyn isn't Godfrey's son?
Yeah, so I'm glad he's already covered his bases here because that's kind of what I assumed he may have been overlooking. So I'm curious why he still holds on to this belief despite all of that stuff now. Elden says, if Godwyn isn't his son, then Godfrey was hoodwinked with the Amber Egg shenanigans. You don't really believe this, but it's funny. Maybe. I mean, that might be the angle he goes with this. He might be onto something there.
Well, in the DLC, we meet the Horn-Sent Grand Dame. And if you continue talking with her...
I don't know why, but anytime I hear somebody pronounce it that way, like, my head just thinks like Jean-Claude Van Damme. So, Empyrean Grand Dame? I don't know. Maybe that's what it is.
Before defeating the divine beast Dancing Lion, she will say the following. "A curse upon thee, rotten miscreant. A curse upon the strumpet's progeny, upon Marika's children, each and all. The curse of the omen shall strike thee down in the form of the sacred beast's ire." So the Horn-Sent Grand Dame cursed Marika's children with the, quote, curse of the omen. And this curse is apparent in two other characters considered to be Marika and Godfrey's children, but also never explicitly stated to be so, Morgott and Moog. Now Morgott and Moog...
Mooch. I gotta love the auto quote sometimes. So yeah, I do have a short covering this where the English version of this text does make it seem like there should be potentially more of a connection between the Hornsent and the Omen, because Curse of the Omen makes it sound like it should be potentially related to that group of people called the Omen, but there is more ambiguity in the Japanese text, and one of the reasons why the English might be going a little bit too far in the treatment of calling the Curse of the Omen is because omen is the object of the preposition of the omen. It's treated as a noun, which makes it sound like a noun, like a group of people or something like that. Whereas the term omen is essentially non-existent in Japanese, and instead we have imi, which is like abominable or abhorrent, something terrible, something along those lines, like deformed. So you have like an ominous curse on America's children versus the curse of the omen. There might still be that connection that's meant to be implied, but we have a lot more distance between the text. And then going beyond that, as I mentioned in my video, I don't think that the curse of the omen, if that is a thing, would have inflicted Mohg and Morgott directly, because they should have already been born, in my estimation, before the time Mesmer went on his crusade. Because if they are of the golden lineage, which I think is more or less confirmed by Godric's great rune, then if Godwyn is not like the oldest demigod of the golden lineage, then it should come down to these two. So then you're just kind of painting yourself into a corner where the oldest of the demigods are somehow younger than Mesmer, even though Mesmer's called a demigod. And maybe there's ways to work around this, but I just don't really think it works. But either way, even if Mesmer is older than them, I would still say that because Radagon married Renala and had the Karyan children stuck in the realm of shadow along with Mesmer and the whole R'hllana situation, that Mohg and Morgott should have already been born before the Purge of the Shadowlands, and then therefore we still have a pretty big discrepancy between the so-called Curse of the Omen and the birth of the Omen twin children. So hey Hilko, how's it going? Mooch, son of America. Ain't that the truth? Yeah, and then you guys are also pointing out that we've got the God prefix stuck into Godwyn's name, so of course he has to be Godfrey's son, right? Maybe.
Mohg being children of America and Godfrey is far less of a stretch. It's actually not a stretch at all. It's incredibly likely that they are. For most of you watching, this requires no explanation, but for the sake of completion, from the intro cutscene of the game, quote, "Soon, America's offspring, demigods all, claimed the shards of the Elden Ring," end quote. Morgott's great rune reads, "This great rune is the anchor ring that houses the base and proves two things: that the Omen King was born of the golden lineage, and that he was indeed the Lord of Leyndell." And Mohg's great rune states that him and Morgott are twin brothers. And of course, this cutscene. The gentleness by which Godfrey, the Lord of the battlefield, handles the body of Morgott, the felled body of his son. Quote, "It's been a long while, Morgott." It's of little consequence given the former explanations, but hair color also has meaning in this game. Any of the children that...
I am already going to take issue with this and point out Mikola, just to kind of head it off. Maybe he will address that as well, but while there is certainly some importance to it, I do think that people tend to take a little bit of a myopic view of it and maybe ascribe too much importance to it at times. And then, hey, Platinum Chip, welcome back into the stream.
That Radagon claims the parentage of have his red hair, and it's significant because it's mentioned in various item descriptions. Quote, "Radahn inherited the furious flaming red hair of his father Radagon, and is fond of its heroic implications." And it's because of the fact that hair color matters in this game that we get to speculate about the parentage of characters like Melina and Mesmer. Mesmer with his red hair and Melina's hair somewhere between red and blonde.
And we also have another thing to consider with Melina, with the fact that her hair actually turns black in the Frenzied Flame ending if you leave her alive.
So anyhow, Godfrey has white hair, Morgott has white hair, Godric has white hair, and Mohg has horns. He doesn't have any hair. So it's only 3 characters, and each of these characters is old. But Godfrey's hair doesn't really look like old man white hair. It's very bright white. So is Morgott's, and so is Godric's.
I don't know. I feel like the Godfrey explanation is a little bit convenient, and even I think the Godric one could be an argument of convenience as well. I don't necessarily think they all had naturally white hair, although who knows? We don't really get depictions of younger demigods and Godfrey either, which is quite a shame, really. And hey, Adlai, welcome back in. How's it going?
So it could be assumed that those of the golden lineage have white hair, and Godwyn clearly inherited his mother's blonde hair. But I'm getting ahead of myself. The curse of the omen. Morgott and Mohg suffer the curse of the omen. Being born an omen during the time of the Golden Order is a very hard life. Omen babies have their horns excised, and most do not survive this process. The ones who do are forced into servitude, to serve as slave muscle in the armies of the lands between. Omen babies born of royalty, such as Morgott and Mohg, do not have their horns excised, but are instead forced to live underground in the sewers beneath Leyndell. The crucible knot, scale, and feather talismans all read, a vestige of the crucible of primordial life, born partially of de-evolution. It was considered a signifier of the divine in ancient times, but is now increasingly disdained as an impurity as civilization has advanced. In the Age of the Erdtree during the time of the Golden Order, horns were one of these vestiges of ancient times, an undesirable trait that was disdained, and we learn very clearly throughout the DLC that during the time of the Horn Scent, horns were indeed viewed as something divine. They were venerated, and the more tangled and knotted the horns you had, the more divine you were assumed. So it's easy to believe that omen born during the time of the Horn Scent would have been venerated and considered divine, that they would have had a much better life. And that's likely true to a point, but the curse of the omen goes far beyond prejudice and persecution. The omen smirk mask reads, "Bears the smirking face of an elder, twisted in wicked delight. The visage is carved in the image of the evil spirits that haunt the omen in their nightmares." The omen are haunted by evil spirits in their dreams, in their nightmares. We see this near the abandoned coffin side of Grace, where we can sneak up on an omen sleeping. He's trembling pretty violently in his sleep and holding his chest. He's scared. We also see these vengeful spirits that torment the omen when we visit the subterranean shunning grounds. It's an attack they use on us. They burst forth these spirits and send them trailing towards us. We know that these are likely the same evil spirits spoken about in the Omen Smirk Mask due to the item description of the Wraith Calling Bell, which calls forth the same spirits. Quote, "Ring bell to summon prowling wraiths. Wraiths are said to be the vengeful spirits of those who died when cursed." So the curse of the omen.
And the Japanese corroborates this, I believe, a little bit more strongly because the term for vengeful spirit is essentially onyo, which is like evil ghost, angry ghost. Vengeful spirit is a really good localization for it. And the same thing is used to describe like what's going on with the omen.
Is not only a curse pertaining to the appearance that the omen bear. It's a life of suffering, being tormented by vengeful evil spirits, and this curse likely would have led to a life of suffering regardless of what time in history they were born into. And this is why the Horn-Sent Grand Dame lays this curse upon Marika. She wants Marika to suffer. She wants her to watch as her children suffer. She views Marika as the great betrayer, and it seems personal. I believe the phrase wanton strumpet is used more than once when she speaks about Marika. And for those of you who don't know, when she calls Marika this, she's basically calling her a cruel skank. I have a number of other videos talking about Marika's beginnings and her likely relationship with this character, so watch those if you're interested. I'm not going to get into it here, but the point is, in an attempt to move on from this long omen-related tangent, it seems to me that the Horn-Sent Grand Dame laid this curse upon Marika's children, yet only 2 of her children, ones we know of at least, suffer this curse.
So just like a little bit of an editing note, the music is slightly loud. Like I can still understand him pretty well. And of course it does help having the auto captions on, but it might be better to like reduce the sound of the music in the background 1 or 2 decibels, depending on like how much bass and trebles in it.
Many of her other children are cursed, but they don't suffer the omen curse specifically. Again, quote, "A curse upon the strumpet's progeny, upon Marika's children each and all. The curse of the omen shall strike thee down, in the form of the sacred beast's ire. Now, I suppose Morgott and Moog being born bearing the omen curse could just be a coincidence and have nothing to do with what the Horn-Sent Grandam said. I have to at least bring this up as a possibility. However,
and I think you could build on that because the Horn-Sent Grandam says that it should come in the form of the beast's ire, and so she might be saying that she wants the what are they called? The sculpted keepers to come down in the form of the lion and enact vengeance on behalf of the Horn-Sent. I think that, in her own way, is kind of a more direct curse on Marika and her progeny, and more specifically Mesmer, which is why she thinks that you could avenge the Horn-Sent if you wear the mask and then kill Mesmer and then go back to her and talk to her with the mask on. So that could be another way of interpreting things relating to the so-called omen curse. Florgeboard says, if Godwyn really was Godfrey's son, why does he use sorcery instead of his God-given fists? It's a good question. Maybe because he was loved by the dragons. Who knows? Although, to be fair, Godfrey kind of has somewhat storm-like stuff going on with the earthquakes.
For reasons that fall beyond the scope of this video that I talk about in other videos, I feel as if the Horn-Sent Grandam and Marika did have a relationship, that she felt personally betrayed by Marika. I also feel that the devs put this in the game for a reason, that they want us to draw the conclusion that Marika's children bore the omen curse because of what the Horn-Sent Grandam said. I don't think she said it for no reason. That Marika is cursed for her betrayal, for what she did to the Horn-Sent. Yet again, only 2 of her children that we know of bore this curse. So why not the other?
And I think you should also ask yourself when this curse was placed on her children. And then, of course, he's bringing up the other question that I would have brought up, why not the other children? All right, Florgeboard, you take
Godwyn,
care.
Who supposedly held the exact same parentage as Morgott and Moog. Well, this I find easier to explain. It is speculative, but I feel like the DLC has shed enough light on Marika's past for this to be a more than viable theory about her children. I believe that Morgott and Moog are the only 2 of Marika's children that we meet in-game who were born of traditional means. And what I mean by traditional means is man plus woman / God equals child. Starting with Rykard, Radahn, and Ranni, these children were born of Radagon and Rennala. Radagon is obviously Marika, but we know the 2 can appear as themselves just within the same body. We know that they have very different personalities, that they are essentially 2 people just inhabiting the same body. And the curse was specifically laid upon Marika, not Radagon. So not exactly traditional means when it comes to Marika bearing these children. We have Miquella and Malenia, who are both, quote, children of a single god, as referenced in the Remembrance of the Rock Goddess item description. They are the children of Marika and Radagon, who again, same person, so not traditional means, not by any stretch, more offshoots than children. And then we have Mesmer and Melina. And I know some people don't believe that Melina is Marika's child. That's fine, we don't need to get into that here, but Mesmer is referenced as a child of Marika multiple times throughout the DLC. And while we aren't told his parentage outright, he does have the red hair of Radagon. So it can be assumed that he came from Marika and Radagon. So essentially Marika alone. And Melina, who references her, quote, mother inside the Erd tree, has pink hair, blonde and red together. So as stated previously, Mesmer and Melina were likely not born of traditional means either. Again, seemingly offshoots. Similar to Malenia's, quote, children, who came from her blossoming in Caelid. And then we have the beginnings of the Golden Lineage, Godwyn, Morgott, and Moog, supposedly fathered by Godfrey, 2 of which suffering the omen curse and 1 who is not, one who was sort of perfect. I speak at length about my beliefs when it comes to the origins of Marika's many children in my last video, where I essentially lay out how I believe that a number of Marika's children are just offshoots of her, or rather, various aspects she obtained when going through the jarring process by the horn scent, which can explain why many of her children embody aspects which one might find less than desirable. Mesmer and his abyssal serpent.
I think beyond that, and he might get to this point, it might be a little bit more convenient to point out the similarities between the demigod children and the great runes they get, because otherwise it might feel a little bit too convenient that Morgott gets the anchor rune, or I guess that's Godric technically. Morgott gets like the golden lineage type Lindell affiliated rune, whatever the hell that means, versus Godric getting the grafting rune. So if these were all aspects of Marika to some degree, then it would make sense that if like the grafting aspect of Marika could have gone into Godric as an offshoot of him, of like Marika, and vice versa. So I am also curious how he would reconcile Godric's relation to the golden lineage in this instance. So we'll just have to keep watching for that.
Melina in her power of the flame of the Giant's Forge, Melania in her scarlet rot, so on and so forth. That is to say that when Marika went through the process of being jarred to become the horn-sent saint, and later a god, that perhaps a snake was also in the jar.
And of course, this whole jar theory is just that, a theory. Not everybody believes in it, and I am against the idea of Marika becoming a saint, mostly because like the Japanese term used for saint is just like a good person. It doesn't mean like saint in a truly religious sense. And so because the Hornsent are jarring their criminals with like essentially holy women, I don't think they're making the holy women any more holy as much as they are using the shamans of the Miko village to absolve the sins of the guilty criminals of the Hornsent. But of course, that is just my interpretation of things.
Thus Mesmer was born. A scarlet bloom was in the jar. Thus Melania was born. There was fire within the jar. Thus Melina was born, the kindling maiden.
And then, of course, with this kind of thought process, one would need to ask, did Marika jar herself then? Or like, where does the Hornsent lie in relation to this? Because Marika should have essentially broken herself away from the Hornsent before her children were born, or at the very least, she would have been divorced from the Hornsent's control, most likely when she was wed to Godfrey. So maybe if you want to make the claim that Godwyn came first, that would be one thing. But then wouldn't this kind of contradict the whole idea of natural versus unnatural birth? Maybe it doesn't, because he was just talking about... Didn't he just mention Rykard, though? No, Snake was for Mesmer. Never mind. This theory is jarring? Oh, you don't say?
Thus Mesmer was born. A scarlet bloom was in the jar. Thus Melania was born. There was fire within the jar. Thus Melina was born, the kindling maiden. Kitetails has a great video on this exact subject as well, so if you're interested, she does a much better job of explaining this theory than myself. And this theory is way more out there than what I'm proposing in this video, but it's worth mentioning because it offers an alternative parentage for Godwyn. That perhaps there was an aspect of the dragon inside the jar as well. Ancient dragons are quite perfect beings in Elden Ring lore, said to, quote, protect their lord as a wall of living rock, as Godwyn protected the city of Landel from the calamity of Gransax during the war with the ancient dragons. And as we know from the Gravelstone seal, the worship of the ancient dragons does not conflict with belief in the Erdtree. After all, the seal and lightning itself are both imbued with gold. And while Mesmer was secreted away within the realm of shadow by his own mother, Godwyn was held in highest regard within the Erdtree capital. Simply put, I believe that with this evidence, particularly that of the omen curse and less of my speculative theories,
was like one question to me that would raise would be then why is Godwyn given preferential treatment if Marika jarred herself to create those children, as opposed to Why would she want to throw herself in a jar with a snake to produce like mesmer or fire from Melina, and so on and so forth? And then, of course, what do you think Marika jarred herself with to get twins in the case of like Mikola and Melania? Were they the butterflies or something else entirely? But anyway, True Connoisseur, nice to see you again. Welcome back in. And then Addison Sanders, welcome to the stream. This is Tinfoil Hat at best. I mean, even if it's Tinfoil Hat at best, I still appreciate the idea that there could be a substantial difference in the children based on the nature of their births, which I'm probably should explore a bit more, to be fair. So then Hilko is asking, just for clarity, do I see what the Hornsent did with jarring is at least a reflection of what the divine ritual is about? Honestly, I kind of would say no, because I don't see how the divine nature of a god gets called down into the body of a champion, being too analogous to criminals' spirits or whatnot being reborn into the flesh of the Miko. So that's kind of like my knee-jerk reaction to that would be no. The jarring is to keep what's inside from being irradiated too much. It's really simple. Or maybe it's to increase the radiation in the jar. Crucible nature, yeah. Without horn sticks, it's a cool idea and could have happened to somebody in the setting. You just don't think it tracks with America. That's fair. Adlai thinks America had a bunch of demigods because each one of them were falling to a curse. So even still, Godwyn is like the big wrench in that plan, as well as like all the Karian children. And maybe you could say like maybe the Karian children weren't actually cursed because it wasn't quote unquote Marika who had them as much as it was Radagon and Renala. But yeah, I don't know.
That Godwyn is more likely a child of Marika alone rather than Marika and Godfrey. That perhaps even Godfrey believed Godwyn to be his own child, but that he wasn't. We learn a good deal about Godwyn's temperament when learning about his friendship with Fortisax as well. And with his lack of the omen curse, his appearance, as well as his temperament and the strangeness by which many of his siblings came into the world, he just doesn't feel like Godfrey's son to me. But much of this video is speculative in nature, so let me know what you think in the comments below. I'm new to making these types of videos, so again, comments are very much appreciated. And if you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button and subscribe for more. Thanks for watching.
So yeah, even though I do have plenty of disagreements with this, I do unironically enjoy and like the video. I'm going to go ahead and share it with you guys. If you want to give Living Jar Cletus a little bit of support, you can do so there. So with all that being said, I'd be curious to see how he reconciles what he brought up earlier in the video with like the whole quote with the Finger Reader Crone calling Godwyn a scion of the Golden Bough, and how that meaningfully differs from like the other children, especially if he is trying to stick to the whole jarring aspect of Godwyn coming from Marika alone. Then would that make Mikola and Melania his kind of more direct siblings? I mean, obviously Mikola does call Godwyn his older brother to an extent, but are they half brothers? Are they full brothers? Or I don't know. It's kind of weird because of the whole like single parent situation, if you want to believe that so strongly. Oh yeah, and then going back to what Adlai was talking about with the curses, if the Omen children were cursed because, well, I mean, I would just disagree with the premise because of the horn scent. So setting aside the Omen children and looking back at like Mesmer specifically, if you do want to say that he's cursed, then why also was Godwyn not cursed? Like what separates Godwyn from Mesmer in this kind of paradigm? I don't think that was given the best justification we could have had. But of course, there could be some components to this that we don't fully understand either. True Connoisseur says, the absence of Godwyn statues and depictions raises a lot of questions about him. Does it? Because we don't really get depictions of Moog and Morgoth, which, to be fair, there is a bit more substantial reason for why we don't have that. But conversely, we don't really have statues of any of the Carian children, or I guess we do have a couple statues of Mikkel and Melania. And I guess one could also make the argument that perhaps the third figure in the sculptures of Mikkel and Melania in the Halig tree could be Godwyn. So, I don't know. They are half-brothers as they don't share the same father. Well, in the traditional understanding of things, yes. But if you take Living Jar Cletus's paradigm here and say that Godwyn was a Jar child and that Mikkel and Melania are kind of like from one individual as well, then should they not be three-quarter brothers? I don't know. It's kind of weird. Addison asks, have I heard the theory about Godwyn being cursed with Deathblight? Maybe not. I'm not sure what you're talking about, like before he died, because if so, I would disagree with that. Well, I guess we could have the possibility of there being Deathblight before the Night of the Black Knives. That is something that I've had to reconsider since the DLC, but I don't want to because it just sucks. So anyway, let's go ahead and transition into the next video of the night with I'm Sorry for Doubting Lies of P. So this will be a little bit of a shift. We were talking about this video, I think yesterday, or yeah, maybe it was yesterday. And it's been a while since I've looked at anything relating to Lies of P. So let's see how it goes.
About Lies of P. So about a year ago, I made a video talking about the problem with Souls-like bosses and a lot of my criticism.
So I do wish that the volume wasn't just in like my right ear, my right channels and everything. So that'll be a little bit of a feedback for this video so far. And Elden Enthusiast, you have a good night. And thanks for dropping by. Take care.
Was targeted to Lies of P's bosses, because Lies of P was a game I was playing at that time and I still didn't finish it. I used it for most of my examples for bad boss design, and I basically said that I prefer From Software's bosses over Lies of P's bosses, and now that I've decided to replay this game after Shadow Hereditary, I realized that I was completely wrong. Lies of P is right now one of my favorite games of all time, and I absolutely love it. I was completely wrong about this game's bosses, and a lot of the things that I said in that video are things that I disagree with now. But that's not the only thing that I will talk about. I will also talk about this game's gameplay, atmosphere, and areas, and I'll say what...
So I can appreciate one's changing of opinions and trying to address them directly. It's always a bit of a tough pill to swallow, a little bit of a bitter medicine, but, you know, much respect for doing that and being transparent about it, because it sucks. So it is also kind of interesting to me that he's making this revelation after having played Shadows of the Erdtree, and I wonder if there's any correlation and or causation as to why. Mortis is saying that they're talking too quickly for you. The words are mushing together. Yeah, I guess he is talking pretty quickly. I tend to also do that in stream. Now I'm starting to become more aware of it, so I'm slowing down. But yeah, that's kind of one of the skills that I think is really underrated for like producing content. Learning how to slow down if you speak more quickly in your normal day-to-day conversations.
What I actually really love about Lies of P. And I'll start with this game's gameplay and game mechanics. First, let's talk about the combat. This game is basically a mix of Bloodborne and Sekiro. You have a Sekiro sparing system, and you have Bloodborne's dashing and focus on being aggressive. And you have Dark Souls 2's based rolling and jumping and movement, but we'll ignore that because I rarely ever use that. And the pairing in this game is a little bit different than in Sekiro's. In Sekiro's you can basically just spam L1 and you'll mostly block everything, while in Lies of P it's different because it takes a lot of skill to parry an attack and you can't just spam L1. You need...
So, I don't know, Obviously, I have my playthrough of Lies of P backed up onto the live section of my channel, so there's always like the record that could go back against what I'm remembering. But for me, playing through Lies of P, there were times where pairing felt really good and consistent, and I didn't really have issues with it. Like the first enemy that I ever encountered, I parried immediately, and that was good. But then there were certain times against bosses where I couldn't exactly tell where the parry window was, and I felt like that might have been a little bit of a design problem in terms of having such an important system integrated into the game, which I don't know how much of that was a me problem versus a systemic problem. SEO sparing system? Yeah, I'm not sure what he meant by a sparing system in Sekiro, and that might have been a little bit of a case of the auto captions not picking it up properly, but I'm not sure what that means either.
To hold the block button at the exact time the enemy attacks. One of my best examples of this is the Duke's Tongue attack, where you need to press the block button right before the Duke's Tongue comes close to you. I like how this game really makes you learn how to parry, but that's only if you want to parry. You can still dodge in this game. Dashing is actually pretty good. This game also has a lot of great weapons. I like how you can basically create your own trick weapons from Bloodborne, and they all have their basic weapon arts, except that now they're called Fable arts, and you need...
See guys, it says Romco right there.
To collect Fable charges that you gain from attacking the enemies or using some items that will help you regain them. You can have a maximum of 5, I think. That's the most I had in New Game Plus. And you can basically create your own unique weapon. The base weapons go to plus 10 in upgrading terms, but you also have boss weapons that are harder to upgrade because they need Moonstones of the Covenant, and at the end of the base game you can only fully upgrade 2 of them, but one of them is gonna absolutely demolish the boss. They are way too overpowered for the base new game. I think they do a lot of damage, and if you play the game you know what I mean. If you use these weapons in the base new game, you will feel like they were, specifically designed for New Game Plus. I personally love them, and they are the weapons that I use. The Duke's Trident is one of my favorite.
I like the obvious audio cuts there. It's just kind of funny to me.
Weapons ever, and I also like the katana that you can find in this game, which is very overpowered because it has S scaling with technique. Technique is one of the main stats you have in the game. It's basically dexterity. The main stats in this game are vitality, vigor, capacity, motivity, technique, and advance. Technique stands for dexterity and motivity stands for strength. And at the start of the game, a lot of people were complaining that strength-based weapons are bad, and I disagree, because you have Fuoco's Greatsword, which is absolutely phenomenal, and it deals a lot of damage, especially once you boost it up to A-tier motivity scaling. And you also have Advance. Advance is a stat that mostly scales with your Legion Arms, and Legion Arms are basically your prosthetic tool from Sekiro, except that they are a lot harder to use because you need very good positioning to use them properly. One good example of this is the Flamethrower, where you need to be as far away from the boss, but still close enough to hit the boss, and you also always need to be moving backwards so the boss doesn't hit you. And once the boss gets close to you, you can press the triangle button, which will move you away from the boss and activate the Legion Arms ultimate ability, which will do a lot of damage to the boss while also avoiding all damage. I also like the quartz system in this game. It's basically a skill tree, but you use quartz. You get it from defeating mini bosses and bigger enemies most of the time, but they let you unlock things like more heals, more fable slots, and things like that. I actually really liked quartz, and I liked a lot of things that it gives you. It opens up a lot of doors and opportunities for what build you can use. Basically everyone's build is different in this game. I also liked the parts.
I don't know, I'm just not feeling this right now, so it's like this part of the video is a little bit too basic, and I'm just trying to understand like what the point of this is so far. Like this is a little bit too reductive. I don't know how you guys feel.
The parts system in this game is incredible. Why? Because it doesn't ruin your fashion like in Dark Souls. You can wear whatever you want, and it won't affect your gameplay. Parts are basically armor where you can use them to gain minimal damage, and they all have their own weight, and you'll find them in chests. This is something that I wish Dark Souls or Elden Ring had, because sometimes equip load gets really annoying and it gets in the way of your fashion, and this kind of just fixes the entire problem. There are also amulets, which are basically just, rings from souls. There are a lot of them. There are also boss amulets, aka special amulets, that give you stronger abilities, like the one you gain from defeating Champion Victor. It gives you a boost in physical damage, or the one you gain from defeating the King of Puppets, which completely boosts your Legion Arm's attack and damage. And overall, if you're not happy with your build, you can just go. You just need to wait a couple of minutes and you'll have gameplay design. I like that this basically represents the evolution of Souls-like. It doesn't use From Software's base formula where you have the basic dodge, R1 and R2 attack. No, this uses everything from every single Souls game and it turns it into one, and I absolutely love this. I know this might sound weird, but I think Lies of P for Souls-likes is basically like what John Jones did for the UFC and for the light heavyweight division. It basically just...
Yeah, so I skipped ahead. I'm a little bit lost, but honestly, I don't really feel like going back to be fully on board, just because the other stuff was just kind of mind-numbing for me. So Levo was asking, is this video just a review? It said he's sorry for doubting Lies of P, so I thought it was going to be a little bit more directed towards that. So maybe this is just like him trying to get people on board who might not know what's going on. Adlai said, you said that, but then experienced it, so therefore you're correct everything you said before and take it back. It feels like an amending video, baby. It's like he speaks without a script, video not really structured. Yeah, I don't necessarily think he has a script, and he might just be editing it after the fact, which is why there's so many audio cuts. And that isn't like the end of the world. However, one way to make sure if you do that style of video to make it sound a little bit more coherent is to add a little bit of breaks and pauses between your statements. So that way people don't know that it's immediately a like cut between two different statements when you're like restating the same thing, or just to do another take now that you have your like thoughts a bit more collected. But, that's one of those differences of approach and technique in like creating content. I've done a couple videos where they've been unscripted, and I am really tempted at times to do more videos like that just because it takes so much longer to actually script things out and then to make sure that my voice is emotive enough. But I know that if I don't script out a video, then I tend to speak more quickly and I don't enunciate as clearly as I could, so people who don't speak English natively tend to struggle a bit more with my content as a result. So just damned if you do, damned if you don't. It seems rushed. I mean, I'll be honest, if your channel isn't that big, it isn't really worth the effort of putting in more effort in a lot of cases, because there's that whole like cost benefit analysis, Scripts are a double-edged sword. So like if you spend a long time polishing up a script, but then you release a video that, has like less than 10,000 views, it's probably not worth the trouble of going the extra mile when you could just kind of collect your thoughts together, speaking into a microphone, chop things together, and then make a video based off of that. Now, you might not get as much viewer retention if you do it that way, but that's kind of like the personal question of, is it worth it? Yes or no? And like, how much more retention would you get if you did go with like the scripted stuff and whatnot? So a little bit of a peek behind the curtain there.
Represents the evolution of everything that came before it, and the evolution of Souls-like games. But that's enough about the gameplay. Let me talk about this game's atmosphere. I absolutely love it. The whole game is based around the original Pinocchio book that I actually read from start to finish, and I really liked it. And this is just a great reimagining of that story in a more edgier, scenery. Basically, this game starts by you waking up in a train, and as you slowly walk outside, you can see that the whole city has been corrupted by the puppet frenzy. In case you don't know what the puppet frenzy is, it's basically an event where puppets went completely insane and took over the city of Krat. Now all there's left is puppets and the Krat Hotel, which is the hub area for this game. Anyways, your goal in this game is to find out who started the puppet frenzy. Sounds simple, right? Well, wrong, because before the real first boss of the game, you see something weird. You see a dead body, but it looks like it doesn't belong here. It's kind of covered in this blue cum, which you don't see on the other bodies. It just feels so out of place, but you just ignore it and you go and beat the first boss of the game, but then after you continue exploring, you get out of Krat and you see some kind of these weird monstrosities walking around. You wonder where they came from, you kill them, and they just feel like they don't belong in the game. They weren't advertised in the trailers, and you don't see them anywhere in the demo, except for the start of the game, and now you see all these zombies and it just doesn't feel right. And as you keep exploring, you enter the cathedral. The cathedral is my favorite area in this game. Not only because it's so well designed, but because it's such a good narrative shift. You think that the whole game is gonna be, like defeating puppets and beating the king of puppets, but no, it's not as simple as you thought it was gonna be. And oh my god, this whole area is nightmare fuel. First of all, the atmosphere is insanely creepy, and you see the boss just roaming around, and you just don't know how deep this cathedral goes. You walk around it and you just see all these monstrosities that you don't know where they came from. They don't look like human, and they don't look like puppets either. But anyways, you go through the cathedral and you see one of my favorite bosses of all time, and that's the bishop. I also really like the area design in this game. I like all the shortcuts that you can find.
Yeah, man, this video is kind of annoying just because of how straightforward it is. I'm not really understanding what he doubted about Lies of P and then why his position changed. All I'm getting right now is oh, I like this, I like this, I like this, but I don't know why he likes it exactly. Obviously, he's enjoying that the enemies in this particular section of the game were not advertised to him, and it felt quite different from what he was expecting. Sure, but what was his doubts to begin with? I just don't know. So, hey, Mildly, how's it going? With that horn says skip. I'm going to give it a little bit longer. I might skip to the next section to see what he says. But, yeah, this isn't looking too hot for me. This feels like a semi-vague review. Yeah, I thought it was going to be different. I think somebody recommended this to me. Maybe not.
All the doors that can lead you to a place that you visited 1 hour ago, and I just really think that the overall design of the areas is great. I also liked the enemy placement. Now, even though I liked this game's area design, one thing stands out about this game as a whole, and that's that it's very, very linear. You know how in most Souls games you can choose where you want to go? For example, in Dark Souls 1, there are a lot of areas you can visit at the start of the game, like the New Londo Ruins, the Undead Burg where most people go, and the place right before the Tomb of the Giants. This isn't the case in Lies of P. The whole game is...
Mildly, thank you so much for the 5. I appreciate it. And the pair with the mic drop. So, right. Maybe he'll go into this in a moment here, but one of the other issues that I'm starting to have is that his statements are just too vague for me to appreciate what he actually likes about it. He says he likes the level design and the enemy placement, but it would be nice to have a bit more fleshed out examples of what in particular he likes. So for me, with a game like Bloodborne, I absolutely love Central Yharnam because I think it does one of the best jobs of tutorializing what to expect in a Soulsborne game, just with how the player needs to go through it. So, for example, if you leave Yosefka's clinic and then go up to the right and you like go down like the little narrow corridor essentially towards where the cleric beast is, you'll start to be ambushed by 2 Yharnamites, and then there's like a third one off to the side. But if you go past the ladder to the cleric beast and then go to the left corner from the like ladder's perspective, then you'll find some like Molotov cocktails. So it'll encourage players to explore more and like try to look into the nooks and crannies of things. And then as you of course climb that ladder towards Gilbert's house, you'll hear the cleric beast screech, so you have that foreshadowing of what's to come. You hear like the bells going off, like people screaming. You've got a lot of ambient noises, things like that. Then as you go into the next section, you see a bunch of patrolling Yharnamites like looking for beasts, presumably to hunt and kill, even though they themselves are like in the process of transforming somewhat. And then as you proceed through Central Yharnam, you'll have some Yharnamites try to ambush you from corners. The devs will try to trick you like by placing out treasure in front of you. So like if you go there without looking around the corner, you're about to get ambushed by a Yarno. So I just really like a lot of the very small things that the level design of Central Yharnam does, which to me is a much more fleshed out example of what I like and why I like it than what I've gotten so far from this review. All right, Mildly, thanks again for the $2. You know what else has good lore? AC6, or so I've heard. Maybe I'll need to experience that someday. Have I ever watched any of Easter Aesthetics videos on stream? I believe I have, but I can't remember any specifics. And then welcome back in, Global Sequence. And yes, I did play Lies of P. Did I like it? Sort of. So for me, Lies of P might have just been a little bit overhyped. I don't think it was a bad game, but I didn't love it. Whoops. But to be fair, I also wouldn't have gone out of my way to play it on my own. And that was one of those games where I was like, okay, if I don't really intend to play this game on my own, maybe this will be something worth streaming just because a lot of people are interested in this. And so that way there's a little bit less buyer's remorse if I don't like it, perhaps. So then also, it's just kind of worth knowing for me, like what people like in Soulsborns and like building off of that and whatnot. True Connoisseur says the level design was one aspect in which you felt Lies of P disappointed. I don't know. I think a lot of that really does depend on what you value in level design. So for like linear levels, I do think that they were pretty good. Like one of the ones that kind of stands out to me is like the little shopping mall towards the end of the game where it's got like the really big dudes in it after you like go through the radio tower section. Even though that place is very linear, it backtracks in a way which I think does feel pretty natural to that specific environment. And I did like aspects of like the church and whatnot, but yeah, like a lot of it just did feel a little bit too video gamey for me personally. Adlai says it was overhyped as the successor to Bloodborne, and it was not. I mean, I don't blame people because, I mean, you could see how much they're still foaming at the mouths for Bloodborne on PC or like a Bloodborne sequel. So I think they were just excited for a Souls game that wasn't actually trash tier. And so having one that's actually moderately good was just kind of a welcome sea change in the landscape, I think. But anyway, with all that being said, I did like a lot of aspects to some of the ways the devs approached the systems of Lies of P. So I liked the upgrading aspect of the things. The talent tree, like the quartz stuff, was just okay to me. I do think having upgrades like that in a Soulsborne is an interesting enough choice. But I didn't think it was like fundamentally different than the upgrades that you get in Sekiro in terms of like the martial arts and like getting the Mikiri counter and whatnot. But I don't really have like too many complaints about it either. There was meaningful choice, so it's just like a skill tree. It's pretty much as basic as you get to me. And then I do think like being able to swap out the weapon handles with their heads and getting different movesets based off the handles and the mix and match that goes with that was really interesting. And having a weapon damage portion being like maxed out and not affecting like the moveset and vice versa is very welcome indeed. And I hope FromSoft like learns from these kind of approaches to like the in-game economy to make it work for their next game. Another $100 lets you voice act with me on AC6. I would need to consider that. I don't know. I mean, if that is how you want my first experience of AC6 to be, maybe. But then I would question like how would the logistics of that even work. All right, Mildly, you have a good night then. So anyway, let's go back into the video.
It's just like a straight line and it's very linear, unlike most Souls games. Most people's playthroughs are going to look the exact same, and the only thing that will be different is the ending. I don't actually have a problem with that. I guess that is what the devs were going for, but I personally prefer the, more open design of Dark Souls and Elden Ring. Now let me talk about my favorite thing about this game, and those are the bosses. I absolutely love all of them. First, let's start with the first tutorial boss of this game, and that is the Scrapped Watchman. I absolutely love him as your first true tutorial boss. Now, yeah, sure, we have the Parade Master and the Donkey, but I don't really consider those guys bosses. This is the first true boss who tells you exactly how the other bosses will play out. All of his attacks can be either dodged or parried. If you fail the parry, but you still blocked the attack, you can gain your health back, and you can do that by attacking. All of the Scrapped Watchman's moves are telegraphed, and you can decide when you want to punish or maybe heal. It's a perfect example of how the other bosses will play out, and it's a beautiful dance of attacks. And overall, I think that he's a solid boss. Now, one thing about the bosses in this game is that they are all extremely hard. You know how I said that every single attack needs to be perfectly parried? Well, yeah, because parrying is usually better than dodging. Now, dodging is still gonna be better in some cases. For example, for the last boss, Simon Manus, I prefer to dodge his attacks rather than parry them because...
I'm trying to remember my experience with Lies of P and the bosses. I didn't feel like this boss was difficult, and I might have been able to beat him like the first or second time around, but I was still trying to get more used to combat. And my vague recollection of the game was that I felt that there was too much of a gap in the combat experiences between fighting a boss versus like the regular enemies, where I felt like I wasn't challenged enough by the regular enemies to get good and interact with the game systems to get a better handle of fighting some bosses. Some bosses were easier than others, and some just felt really difficult to me for not reasons that I fully understand. Like, I felt as though I should have beaten Hercules or Victor or whatever his name was much earlier than I did, but I was just not doing it for whatever reason. And same thing with like the Valkyrie girl that stomped the crap out of me. Well, no, that one actually felt like I didn't know what I was doing. I take that one back. So anyway, yeah. This thing is better, except when it isn't better. How elucidating. Okay. True Connoisseurs agrees with the enemy versus bosses comment. Lexasia, yes. Laxative, that's what I called her. Thank you, Levo.
Because his parry timings are actually very hard to memorize. But for someone like the Duke, I would always prefer parrying because it lets me stagger him easily, and it can even let me get my own health back. For bosses like Laxatia, I prefer to use both.
You know, this is so frustrating about YouTube that no matter what next video I go to, it just goes to auto. So all of the like quality drops and whatnot, and just the constant buffering, I feel like is mostly because of it trying to switch so frequently between qualities. Where, anyway, this is just annoying me.
because both of them will work for specific attacks. Another strategy that works for bosses is running away from them. This can be used for bosses like Champion Victor or the Black Rabbit Brotherhood, but your stamina will get drained pretty easily, and stamina management in this game is very hard and it's much less forgiving than in a game like Elden Ring. In this game,
Yeah, I would agree with that. I felt like certain boss fights, like the Rabbit Brotherhood, was a lot more difficult, mostly because of stamina management, and of course getting used to dealing with multiple enemies in a game where that wasn't commonly an issue. But like I think I said this yesterday on stream, it felt like Lies of P was very feast or famine in that you could be kicking a boss's ass, but if you ever got caught out of position, it just felt like you got punished so much more heavily in that game than in Elden Ring, up until you get to like the last section of Elden Ring where it essentially becomes a boss gauntlet and you'll get like 2-tapped. Up until that point, I think like Lies of P was more punishing. You know that name very well. You spent over 10 hours on your challenge run on her. Man, I was about to say I probably spent 10 hours on her normally, but I don't think that's true. I think it was like a couple hours. I know I went over that stream, but I really went over against Victor. But yeah. I just remember, I think it was like Scowleezy that was really upset that I wasn't having too many issues with a lot of the bosses. I'm like, yeah, guys, I played a Souls game once or twice. I don't know. But with that being said, I certainly did have some struggles against Luxasia and like Victor the most. And Romko, aka Romeo, in his second phase was really screwing me up until I got back into the Bloodborne mindset of not moving backwards, but rather inward. So anyway, sometimes that's all it takes. Treat it like the Orphan of Kos.
Recharges very, very slowly, so the amulet that makes your stamina recharge quickly is basically mandatory for this game. Another thing that I like about the bosses is how it utilizes the game mechanic that once you are out of your basically Estus flasks, you can recharge them by being aggressive and hitting the boss more and more. This saved me from death a lot of times, probably for almost every single boss fight, and it's very useful. But I do have a couple of complaints about the bosses. Even though I take back everything I said in the first video, I still need to talk about the things I don't like. Most bosses in this game have 2 health bars. Now yeah, 2 health bars are good if you don't know if they're coming, but for the bosses in Lies of P, you basically know that a second health bar is gonna pop up once you defeat the first one. Like, once you hit the boss and the boss literally takes a lot of damage, that's already a red flag and shows that a second phase is incoming. Because bosses in this game have a lot of health, and when I say a lot of health, I mean a lot. Bosses in this game usually take about 5 minutes to beat. That was like my average time to beat a boss in this game. But when you see that a boss's health bar is squishy, you're not happy at all, because you know there's an entirely new second phase waiting for you with double the bullshit and double the attacks. Another thing I don't like about this game's bosses is how every single boss post Champion Victor will have this weird combo before you stagger them just to catch you off guard, and like, this is horrible. Some bosses have it, but some don't, and it takes 0 skill to dodge them. They are literally there just to catch you off guard as a fuck you. I'm glad that
I remember that being a really big annoying point for me with her. Like, there were certain moves where I felt like they would arbitrarily punish me when they were safe at other times. And that was actually one of the biggest criticisms I had with Shadow of the Erd Tree. Gaius had a couple moves like that. Bale was really bad. And Mesmer wasn't that bad once I finally learned his moveset. But when it was bad in Shadow of the Erd Tree, it was really bad. Anyway. You wish more Shadow of the Erd Tree bosses had a second health bar? What bosses would you want to have a second health bar? And if so, how would they be implemented? I think Ramana could deserve one, perhaps. That would actually probably be pretty good with the whole rot aspect of her character. But I couldn't really see that working too well for Metter, Gaius. I almost said Sunflower, but it has 3 health bars, sort of. Or what's its face? Midra? Midra kind of does have 2 health bars if you really think about it. Anyway.
From Software doesn't use this because, in my opinion, this is just something that I don't like, and you don't know when it's coming. Well, you see, Luxaxia has it in both the first phase and second phase. However, the next boss only has it in the second phase, and it's not nearly as complicated as Luxaxia's because he just bitch slaps you. I don't know, man. I'm not a big fan of that. I think From Software and other gaming companies did it better. I think this is an experiment that just doesn't work for me. If you like it, that's fine, but I personally find this to be bullshit. But what bosses are my favorite? I'm pretty sure that I already mentioned Archbishop Andreas as being one of my favorite fights, and the reason for that is because of the atmosphere. I absolutely love this boss's boss arena, and I overall really like his moveset. And even though the tongue attack is really fast, it's actually really easy once you learn it. The second phase is very similar to the first phase, but I like that. It doesn't make me learn an entirely new boss, but there is a new part of the boss with new attacks, and there's the old part of the boss that you can attack too.
Yeah, I felt like when I beat the bishop that it was a little bit RNG, or that I might have like cheesed it by just focusing on like the first boss portion of the body. So I felt like I didn't actually get good. I don't know. Hey Stella, how's it going? Nice to see you again.
So I like Archbishop Andreas, and I personally think he's one of my favorite bosses in this game. But another one, and this might be surprising for you, yeah, sure, Champion Victor and the King of Puppets are also great, but the Black Rabbit Brotherhood's Revenge. You know, most people
I don't know about the Revenge, but I did like the first Black Rabbit Brotherhood. It took me a minute to get used to it, but I don't know, there's something I liked about that. I really wish we could get that damn Buster Sword as a weapon though.
Absolutely hate this boss, but I actually really like it, because once you understand that you can basically just backstab everybody in the Black Rabbit Brotherhood, the whole boss is easy, and the second phase, when the Big Brother shows up, is gonna be pretty fun. I really had so much fucking fun fighting these guys. You might think I'm a psychopath now, but man, I like it. And I also like the pillars in the boss arena. You can utilize them pretty well to get the Black Rabbit Brotherhood separated and then backstab them one by one. Another boss I like that I've already mentioned is the King of Puppets. I think he is my favorite boss in this game. He's extremely fun to fight. I love his first phase. I love his second phase.
I did like this fight, however, I felt like there was just a weird component of RNG with phase 1 where I would either like no-hit him or he would just straight up kill me if he did like something different, and that was kind of weird to deal with sometimes. Hey Revenant, welcome back in. You were surprised Silent Hill wasn't nominated? Yeah, we were talking about that on the Discord, about like how weird it is that Shadow of the Erdtree is nominated as a full-on game. Someone was like saying, well, why isn't it? Why shouldn't it be considered a full-on game if like Tears of the Kingdom is its own game, like uses the same engine, the same app and everything. But for me, it's like you can't even play Shadow of the Erdtree if you only buy Shadow of the Erdtree, but you can at least for Tears of the Kingdom. So yeah, I'm also surprised Silent Hill wasn't on there for Game of the Year. Now, granted, I do think that Shadow of the Erdtree is a great expansion in many ways, but it's not a game, it's an expansion.
He's absolutely phenomenal. I love all his attacks, I love his design, and I love the lore behind him. Another boss that's great is Champion Victor. Why? Because he only has 1 health bar, God bless, and he's a pretty easy boss to deal with. He's pretty fun to fight, he's pretty fast, but you can utilize the running away from him mechanic to trigger one of his attacks that is very easy to punish. Also, you can parry a lot of his attacks pretty easily, but the ones you can't parry, I advise you to dodge because he hits pretty damn hard. Another great boss is Luxaxia.
I don't know. What kind of advice is that? If you can't parry the attack, dodge? No, I choose the third option. Just tank it? Okay.
Now, Luxaxia is an extremely fun boss. I love her first and second phase, even though the second phase has the bullshit last stand before stagger attack, but I think that she's overall a really fun and fast-paced boss. I love how you can utilize her shooting lightning bolts at you by parrying them and doing a lot of damage to her in the process. And I actually love how easy it is to sometimes parry her attacks just by spamming L1 the good old Sekiro way. And overall, I really like her. But you know what other boss I like? Simon Manus. Simon Manus is the final boss of the game based on what ending you want, but he is so damn fun to fight. I love his moveset. I love how fast he is. I love his first phase. His second phase is absolutely beautiful. I love the atmosphere. His moveset is insanely good. I like all of his attacks, all of his range attacks. His AoE is extremely big, but
Yeah, I'm kind of tempted to just skip this now because it's just like the same stuff. Yeah, I liked Simon Manus because his attacks were really well telegraphed, almost like too well telegraphed. Because I believe I one-shot him, but I did kind of break my cardinal rule of like not using consumables so much because I could one-shot him, and for me, like a one-shot kind of trumps the no consumable rule, especially when you like realize like, oh, this is the final boss. You don't save your elixirs because there's nothing to save them for. But anyway, he wasn't the final boss for me. We did have like the things beyond that. So anyway, moving past this because it's just I like this. Didn't he say earlier that he didn't like Luxasia? He said that he didn't like some of her more bullcrap stuff, especially the ones that she did in phase 2. I don't remember exactly how he phrased it, but I think he was talking about how she could like stagger combo some things or get out of a stagger combo. Maybe that's what it was.
And yeah, that's about everything I can say about Lies of P. I can't wait to see what devs do with this game's DLC and with the second part of this game that's also confirmed to be coming out. And I overall really like this game. Anyways, if you guys enjoy...
Alright, so I'm kind of done with that then. So Revenant asks for the whole Shadow of the Erdtree controversy. It'd be weird if they put it in a category if it doesn't have any real competition. What could they even put it against? To be fair, I do think like at this point in the gaming verse, if that's what we want to call it, there are enough DLCs and expansions that might warrant a expansion or DLC of the year consideration. And so you could potentially pair it up against games like Final Fantasy or World of Warcraft with their expansion models. I don't know how fair that would be, but you know, it's a thought at least. Then, of course, aside from Shadow of the Erdtree, Blasphemous 2 also came out with its DLC, the Mea Culpa, which I think was a pretty good DLC. And I don't know, I just don't think of a lot of, I guess I don't keep up with a lot of games to know what all else has had DLC. Oh yeah, Diablo 4, Vessel of Hatred. Yeah, I would consider that like a more traditional DLC with its expansion. True story. So maybe not like the most fierce competition, but I mean, it's something out there to at least recognize them and the efforts of devs to like keep games going, I guess. So I don't really think it would do too much harm, provided that freaking Larian Studios or other category winners get more than 30 seconds to thank everybody. Anyway, moving on from that, let's go ahead into the next video of The Two Fingers and Elden Ring Explained by Titan. And as I've said before, Titan has been a member of the community for a long time. I believe this is their first video, and they have a couple more. I haven't watched any of them yet, because these were coming out when I was... oh yeah, I forgot to share the other one. When I was looking at... like, when I was playing other games on stream. So anyway, here is Lee 8 video about I'm Sorry for Doubting Lies of P. I did not like it. I don't necessarily dislike it. But yeah, I'm just going to move into Titans at this point. All right, so Elden Ring and the platonic forms with The Two Fingers and Elden Ring Explained.
Fate to believe that the world we experience with our senses is just a shadow of a higher reality.
I'll turn it up.
Made up of perfect, unchanging forms. These forms are the ultimate truths, and they are the key to understanding everything in existence. But how do we reach this higher knowledge? Higher knowledge, our minds and our senses. Plato asks us to consider something as simple as 3 fingers, one large, one medium, and one small. The medium finger might look big compared to the small one, but small compared to the large one. Our senses, like sight or touch, tell us something is big or small, but it is all relative. This relativity.
I want to go back. Plato argues that this contradiction highlights the need for understanding things through eternal, unchanging forms beyond sensory perception. Okay.
But it is all relative. This relativity allows for our medium finger to seem big compared to our small finger and small compared to our big finger. This shows our senses can contradict themselves.
And of course, one could make the epistemological argument that how can you even know what a medium finger is to begin with? You can't until you compare it to something else. So this might be putting the cart before the horse, as I feel like I've been saying a lot lately, huh?
Plato argues that our senses can be misleading. What we need is to understand things through our mind, through the unchanging, perfect reality that exists beyond our sensory experiences. In Elden Ring, the 2 fingers represent this limitation of our senses. They are the intermediaries between the material world and the greater will, but they can only guide us towards the truth indirectly. Like our senses, they give us the incomplete, sometimes contradictory information. Now think of the Elden Ring. It's like Plato's realm of forms, the perfect eternal truth that lies beyond the physical world. Just as Plato says we cannot truly understand something like a finger through our senses alone, the 2 fingers cannot fully grasp the Elden Ring in its entirety. They can only offer a glimpse into the perfect order that the Elden Ring represents. Plato uses the example of a circle to explain this further. When an artist tries to draw a perfect circle, they can never get it exactly right. Every circle we see in the world is flawed, but we can still recognize it as a circle because our mind knows the form of a perfect, unchanging circle that exists beyond the physical world. This is the ideal form of circularity. The Elden Ring itself is like Plato's form, a perfect circle, the flawless, eternal structure that holds everything together. When it is shattered, the world falls into chaos. The physical reality becomes broken. It's like how the imperfect circles we draw are mere reflections of the perfect, unseen circle that Plato describes. The 2 fingers, representing our senses, can only point us towards the truth of the Elden Ring. They can't fully explain it.
So about that idea, I'm not so sure how well we can map the Elden Ring itself onto Plato's ideas of the realm of true forms, because you can interact with the Elden Ring in a kind of more direct physical way than you could the realm of the true forms. I do understand where Titan is coming from with this, but I do think there might be some caveats to it that I'm not fully on board with.
Like Plato's philosophers, must look beyond our senses to show us how to use our mind to grasp the perfect order that is the Elden Ring. Plato teaches us that our senses can only show us part of the picture. The real truth, the realm of forms, lies beyond what we can see or touch. In the same way, the 2 fingers can't give us the complete truth about the Elden Ring. They only hint at it, pushing us to seek the greater will's perfect order for ourselves. Plato's immutable God. Plato believed that the perfect God is immutable, unchanging, eternal, and constant. In his dialogue, The Republic, he argues that it is impossible that a God should ever be willing to change. Being as is supposed, the fairest and best that is conceivable, every God remains absolute and forever in his own form. Change, in the platonic sense, implies imperfection. This idea of divine immutability becomes a central tension in Elden.
I'm a little bit skeptical about this claim, and I feel like this might be an issue of translation, because from my understanding of Plato and Socrates, they lived in a very well-known pantheistic society. So then to say that it is impossible that God should ever be willing to change with a capital G and not like gods or the divine, I think is self-serving perhaps on the side of the translator of this. And I do know that Plato was very strongly supported or used as support for the Roman Catholic Church for quite a while, especially with like Thomas Aquinas and whatnot, and trying to bridge the gap between how do I say it? I'm failing the terms between like Corin, are you still here in chat? Oh, hey Titan, we got you. Neoplatonism? Nah, that's not the word I'm thinking of, but like the difference in Christianity before they started to try to justify the ideas of Christianity with Neoplatonism and like the before times. I can't remember the strict term. Anyway, moving past that, let me go back to Titan's comments. Us being able to interact with the Elden Ring, the realm of forms, is bad. Ronnie's ending fixes this. Okay, so I might just be jumping ahead of you right there. Oh, you meant that's what influenced Christianity. Right, well, there was a long time, from my understanding, that Catholic Church did not have direct access to Plato's texts, and it didn't really come back into being up until like right before Thomas Aquinas. And then Thomas Aquinas did the best job trying to reconcile things relating to Plato and Aristotle with what they understood of Christianity. So they're trying to use the logic induced in Platonism to support the ideas of, or the justifications for divinity in the Bible. But that is also not like my field of expertise by any means. So you're saying the immutable God is supposed to parallel the platonic forms? That is why Plato is against a God changing. So right, but my point is this actually supposed to be understood as God or the divine in general? And then that could be, I mean, I might be splitting hairs here, but I'm just a little bit curious about where this text is coming from and how well it correlates to like the original Greek. And then Dylan, nice to see you again. Plato did make arguments on a supreme god above other gods as a hypothetical perfect being and argued there could only be one such being. You don't know if that explains the translation. Okay, perfect. Maybe. I'm more willing to accept that then if that's the implication here. So, I want to back up Titan's video a little bit because I did have some more thoughts in relation to that, but then I got sidetracked by the linguistic weeds as I am wont to do. And Titan, welcome into the stream. Nice to have you here. The capital G is suspicious?
In his dialogue,
yeah.
The Republic, he argues that it is impossible that a god should ever be willing to change. Being as is supposed, the fairest and best that is conceivable, every god remains absolute and forever in his own form.
All right, that's what it was. So going back to the idea of a disambiguated God and trying to replace this notion with divine, and I don't know how fair this is to be, transparent here. Since Plato is talking about the divine realm of forms or true form or whatever stand-in you want to use for that concept, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong here. In Plato's mind, the realm of true forms is something that couldn't necessarily be interacted with because it's essentially a metaphysical realm beyond our physical reality, and that contains like the fullest essence of a thought or an idea or ideation of an object. So like the essence of true chairness could exist within this realm, which is why he uses the allegory of like the cave where we might understand the idea of the concept of the number one, but the number one itself does not exist in reality. Only ideas of the number one exist in reality. And so whenever we look at the number one, we don't actually see all the totality of oneness manifest within the world. We only see one representation of it due to our current limitations of our perception. So that's why he compared like looking at shadow puppets on a wall cast by a fire as representing the forms that exist beyond the cave and whatnot. So that's kind of why I was a little bit tripped up by this explanation, because this idea of God with a capital G could be self-serving, like a more Christian paradigm, which represents like the true omnipotence of like the Abrahamic God compared to the constancy of ideas which don't fully interact with the world, but only ripples of their fullness gets reflected into our physical world, perhaps. Right, so that's Without Horns is on the same page there. All right, next you have A Good Night, and thanks for sticking around. This god is the ideal that the Philosopher Kings would look up to. The Philosopher Kings are the Empyreans. Okay, I will try to recall that. Empyrean for you equals Philosopher King. Okay. Without Horns said, he also thought that the reason there was a variety in things was that they were just all imperfect forms of a single real thing they descended from. Okay, I don't think I heard that part, that like second half of them all descending from a single real thing. So, okay, let's go back in.
Change, in the Platonic sense, implies imperfection. This idea of divine immutability becomes a central tension in Elden Ring when we uncover a secret that shakes the very foundation of the Golden Order. Radagon is Marika.
You know, I was like, man, that set looks really fresh. What is that? I'm like, oh, it's a DLC set that explains it. Is this like the altered pure blood knight type thing? It looks good.
Marika.
Can't remember what it's called. I don't know the DLC stuff well enough.
From a Platonic perspective, this duality reveals a contradiction in the Golden Order's philosophy. The gods, who are meant to represent divine perfection, should never change, and yet here we find two distinct forms of a single god, Radagon and Marika. When this revelation,
Plato spoke a lot about swag and how important it is. I don't doubt you. And then, hey, Iman, welcome back into the stream. How you doing?
God, Radagon and Marika. When this revelation comes to light, we see its effects on characters like Golmars. Golmars, a philosopher in search for the ideal, finds himself perplexed by the instability of the gods. His philosophy is Platonic at heart, rooted in the pursuit of an immutable truth. He communicates through the movement of his fingers, just like Cratylus, a follower of Heraclitus, stopped speaking and resorted to pointing, believing that words couldn't capture the constant flux of reality. He seeks a perfect, immutable truth, but the gods themselves, Marika and Radagon, have revealed their nature to be changeable and divided. The revelation causes an existential crisis. How could a god, a being meant to embody perfection, change or divide itself? This is a direct challenge to Plato's notion of divine immutability. For Golmars, it's as if the perfect circle he had been pursuing all along is shattered by the discovery that even the gods themselves are not exempt from change. Interestingly, after we informed Golmars and Corian about Radagon and Marika's true nature, we received the immutable shield incantation.
What on earth did you do to the Master? Well, not that I'm complaining. Master's finger moves again, resuming his cogitation. More than good enough for me. I haven't the words to thank you. So I'd like to pass this on to you instead. A glimpse into the heart of the Golden Order. Documented by yours truly. To think that Radagon was Marika herself.
So a little bit of a suggestion for Titan, because I've definitely run into this throughout my like video making processes here. So when you first brought up Immutable Shield, I thought that was good. And then I think it would have been a little bit better if you brought it up earlier in the Koran dialogue, so that way people could like ponder it while they passively listen, or maybe you wanted people to focus more on the Koran dialogue first. That's fine either way. So when dilemma that I've run into that I've kind of resolved a little bit more recently in my video making is when I have a lot of negative space, but my center is taken up in such a way that everything like looks kind of garbage around it. One thing that I've done recently is shift the entire image off to the left or the right, and then I put like the text block in its own little section on 1/3 of the screen, and so the other part of the screen is just taken up by like the image, and it still like looks fine. You don't have to do that, but that's just something I've noticed, which I think like looks better, at least for my videos. And then on that note, if you guys ever, anybody in chat, if you ever need like recordings for dialogue that doesn't have sound effects, there's a good chance that I might already have gotten my footage with it. So if you just need like the actual audio, I might be able to hook you up if you ever need. It's a good idea. You're always looking for feedback. Yeah, so that's like one of the things. So not to like toot my own horn here, but obviously with my more recent videos, I've done a lot more graphical type stuff. What did I call that video? Hold on. I'm going to try to show you what I mean. I'm trying to blank. I'm not trying to blank, but I am blanking. Maybe I should order this by release date. Okay, yeah, that'll work. Oh, okay, my shorts will be fine. The remembrance? All right, so this is kind of what I've been doing as an example for like all my shorts and whatnot. So here we go. It's kind of like the same thing that you and I have going on right here, but I made this like little fake infographic of like the item description box, and then I like took the borders in the game and like made this so that way it looks a little bit cleaner and like the actual game. And if you want, I mean, I'll share this damn little info or the little graphic that I made for the third of the screen if you guys want it. And yeah, and then this is just like the game icon, which you already have. So if you guys ever want stuff like that, or, you know, want those kind of suggestions, just let me know and I'll try to hook you guys up. Yeah, your more recent videos are better. You're experimenting with graphics as a background for empty text. Yeah, no worries, man. I mean, it took me a really long time to get to where I am, just from like incrementally building up off of the little bit that I knew at a time. And of course, like my first videos, like just kind of took as like, oh yeah, these are probably going to be really crappy as I learn like what I'm doing. So I think even right now, your first video is actually a lot better than my first video was in terms of like production value goes.
Two echoes the platonic ideal. A shield represents a search for an unchanging perfect defense in a world full of imperfection and contradictions. The search for immutability continues, even in the face of divine contradiction.
Oh yeah, so going back to the actual content of the video itself, I do think comparing Play-Doh to Gold Mask is interesting, especially with the way that you set up the perfect circle before, because that goes pretty well with the representation of Gold Mask's mending rune of perfect order. So I think that's just kind of a neat little tie-in. Whether or not that's actually accurate, I think is a bit debatable, but I think in terms of serving your agenda, it's a pretty good illustration that you've set up mentally speaking there.
Just as Cratylus realized the futility of language in a world of constant change and resorted to silence, so too does Goldmask grapple with the contradiction of an imperfect, immutable God. The ideal immutable form that Plato describes seems unattainable in the world of Elden Ring, where even gods are flawed and the Golden Order itself is built upon an unstable foundation. The mending rune of perfect order expresses the desire to restore what is broken in the Golden Order. It suggests that the instability or imperfection of the order is due to the fickleness of the gods no better than men.
And I do think that this one does work a little bit better than the previous screen. I would maybe raise this ever so slightly, but it's not that big of a deal. And maybe like move this one to the left. And then another thing you can do is if you want to have the images in the background, you can like lower the opacity so that way they look like a little bit darker. Or if you go into like the color settings and grade it, you could like reduce the brightness and whatnot. So that way this stuff pops out a little bit more. And of course, you could add a different background, so that way these are set off more against the actual background and whatnot.
This flaw directly opposes Plato's vision of a divine being that is perfect and immutable, and it is the fly in the ointment that Golmar seeks to eradicate. In the end, the question remains, can there be a perfect, unchanging order, or is the very notion of divine perfection doomed to crumble under the weight of reality's imperfections?
So that's a good question. I would bring it a step further and ask, is a quote-unquote perfect order a desirable one? Which I think many people have varied opinions on as it relates to Gold Mask's ending there.
Thank you for viewing the video. For the next video, I plan to explain how Plato's idea of an aristocracy maps onto the Golden Order and how this informs us on the nature of Empyreans.
All right, cool. So you even left yourself a little bit of extra time there. One thing that I would do if I were in your shoes now would go to your YouTube settings and add your end cards here. So this way you could put your like subscription button here and like, oh, check out this video, my newest one, or check out this other one. So that way you could have people organically more easily subscribe to your channel and whatnot. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and give a sub to Titan because this is unironically a good video. Obviously, we have like a little bit of perhaps disagreements or more questions about it. And as far as like more general feedback, I think it might serve you a little bit better if you pull your focus out a little bit more and then try to make it a little bit more accessible to people who might not be too familiar with Plato as to why you can use Plato to kind of like justify these beliefs or these parallels and tie-ins into Elden Ring. But as you said, this was your first video and you feel as though you've gotten better with your newer ones. So I'm sure we'll be checking out some more of your stuff in the future as well. Yeah, absolutely. You're welcome. If you download these videos with YouTube Premium, you can avoid buffering when streaming them. That's probably true, but I mean, real talk, half the time I'm only deciding what videos to watch like an hour before the stream. So that would require me needing to get my act together. And I know who runs things around here, and it's a pretty loose ship. I can say that much. So yeah. But I do appreciate that little bit of feedback as well. I mean, honestly, like, YouTube just needs to get their crap together. And the weirdest thing to me is I pretty much only ever really feel like I have this issue while I'm streaming. So maybe there's something going on with my not stellar internet service that, like, makes YouTube a lot worse. But, yeah, it's just kind of a little bit baffling. Like, needing to get out of full screen and then, like, scroll down to the comments to like stop the video buffering. It's that's just not right. There's something wrong there. I don't know what's going on because I don't even have any real extensions on this browser except I think for Rikaikun or whatever it's called in Chrome. No, it's still called Rikaikun. Oh, hold on. I have return YouTube dislike and Rikaikun enabled, and that's it. Like that, these should not be breaking the experience that badly. Well, maybe the dislike button is. Maybe I should turn that off. Who knows? So anyway, yeah. Thanks for the video, Titan. Dylan wonders if there might be issues with YouTube today. You've had problems too. I wasn't having this amount of problems like a month ago, but there were certainly days where I was having issues. But I figured that all out by, getting out of full screen and then going into the next video. Or going into... Anyway. We're good. So, okay, let's check out the next video with Gaming as a Perfectionist by Daryl Talks Games, I think.
There's a phenomena in gaming.
Oh, wow, that's a lot louder. Okay, hold on. Let me turn that down for myself and possibly yourselves. All right. Daryl Talks Games, Gaming as a Perfectionist. So, about this topic in general, I don't know how I feel. At times, I do feel a little bit more perfectionistic. I would say that I'm opportunistic in that I like to explore as much as I possibly can most often. So I don't know if I would say that's a perfectionistic streak because I don't necessarily care about like the perfection challenge of like doing a challenge run of things. So I never really felt the need to get like 100% in a song in like Guitar Hero 3, but to me, like perfectionism just kind of extended as far as like beating through the fire and flames a couple times to prove that it wasn't a fluke. So anyway, curious to see how I'm going to feel about this as we go on, just as like a self-analysis, I suppose. At least I got rid of the emoji fountain. That was actually YouTube. So what had happened was, I don't think I can show it to you guys because the way that I have it, but yeah, they moved the stupid heart icon from the bottom right that was like covering all of your guys' text stuff completely below it, so you can see it like pop up here. So that was something they figured out because that annoyed me, and I would have to manually get rid of it every time in case I wanted to delete somebody and whatnot. Stella says, you always think of perfectionism in gaming as like 100% achievements. And I do think that's a big part of it as well. So I'm just curious how this might shape my opinion about things. Adlai says, without horns has 5 perfect games. He's a perfectionist. Yeah. Levo brings up a good point that perfectionism does not equal trophy hunting. I would agree with that to an extent. To me, like perfectionism would be like no hitting a game versus like platinuming it, perhaps. And I think there's degrees to this, so I'm curious to see how nuanced this video is going to be. So let's go ahead and dive on in.
There's a phenomena in gaming I like to call the hab. It happens when you
That's too low for you guys. I'm bumping it up.
You know that you have to go this way to continue the main objective, but there's this little voice in your ear that says, check the other way, just in case. And right as you're about to ignore that voice and just continue, you go to take a step, indecision hits you, and then hallway ankle breaker. And this happens to me so stupidly much when I game. It's like there's this little monkey in a diaper sitting on my shoulder that won't let me ignore that pile of boxes holding a healing item that I've probably already got 40 of. If there's a suspicious nook on the map, I've got to check it.
Yeah, that's true. If there's like a percentage on a map in a Metroidvania, I'm like, it exists, therefore it must be conquered. So that is kind of like my perfectionistic streak. As far as the Pokemons go, I made sure to catch them all. And the dog is snoring. And because I was on deployment for one of the times as becoming a Pokemon master, I went ahead and made a living Pokemon dex, which entails like getting the evolutionary form of every Pokemon and like putting it into the thing. Mostly because I had an abundance of time while on deployment, and yeah, I don't know. It's just kind of nice to have, and just to say that I've done it, and that kind of like unironically having gone through and playing like Pokemon to that degree, I feel like in some ways sets me free of the curse of like wanting to go back and do something that I hadn't completely completed before. So I've got a lot of games that I feel a little bit cursed by for not having completely 100%ed and seen everything that I do want to go back through someday and eventually do. So one of them for me is like Legend of Mana. I played that game a lot. I've probably seen all of the content at one point or another, but I don't think I know I have never like done it all on like one complete save and whatnot. Level got every single weapon in Elden Ring. You farm drops from enemies and maxed every weapon to +9 level. That's what perfectionism is. Yeah, so I'm really tempted to curse Levo by saying, is it really perfectionism if they're not all upgraded to +10 or +25? But anyway, for me, I also gathered every weapon, but because I'm such a perfectionist, I was like, well, what if I want to power stance every weapon? So I actually gathered 2 of all of the weapons. I didn't upgrade them all to +9 or +24 because that's a little bit annoying. And just knowing the ability that I had the ability to do it if I ever needed to for a specific weapon would be nice enough for me. So now I don't know why I'm having the whole memory issue with YouTube again. Let me reload this stuff, because that's really annoying. That's what you would define as a completionist. I do think there's a bit of a difference between a completionist and a perfectionist, but I would say that there's a lot of overlap in that Venn diagram. So the silences that I make scare you? Oh no, what silence did I do? Was it when I got distracted by the dog? sometimes I get distracted by the dog, and then I lose my train of thought, and then I have to go find it again. So let's go back into the video. I shouldn't have backed up. I should not have backed up.
We got 40 of. If there's a suspicious nook on the map, I've got to check it. If there's a crate, I must break it, or at least see if I can break it. If there might be a chest or ammo around this corner, I have to find out. And what nags me the most about this is how grating it feels when it happens to me during like a chase scene or when narratively I should be in a rush, but of course...
Casey! Is that...
Yeah, I definitely agree with that as well. Like, it's problematic because it ruins my own experience, but I have literally nobody to blame but myself. And maybe we could blame the game to some degree. No, we could definitely blame the games to some degrees. Because they've kind of built into me a real feeling of FOMO by how many times really important items are gated between like one-time events. So because he had just had Final Fantasy VII on the screen, the one example that stands out to me is in the original Final Fantasy VII, when you're doing the submarine missions, you can permanently miss the Leviathan materia, or well, you can essentially lose the Leviathan materia permanently because you miss an item which will allow you to suppress the flames and Wutai to pick up the Leviathan, and you don't care. So anyway, moving on. Yeah, I do sometimes forget to turn the mic back on. Well, the issue is sometimes I don't remember when I've turned it on and off, so I might just be in the off position. It's definitely a bigger problem in more narrative, more linear games, you feel? That's when it bothers you the most. Yeah. Adlai is a completionist, but not a perfectionist. You like to screw up and learn from those screw-ups. Yeah, that's probably where I am, now that I think about it. It depends on how much I like a game. And Cohiba, I feel like I've seen that name before. Welcome back in. For you, it's more like you want to get everything the first time so you don't have to play the level again, which never works out. Yeah, so for me... That is actually pretty true too, now that you mention it. Unless like there's something really compelling about a game that makes me want to replay it or to experience it from a different angle, which is why I think I tended to have liked Final Fantasy VII Rebirth a lot more than Final Fantasy XVI, because I know that if I replay Final Fantasy XVI, like absolutely nothing is going to be different for me, even on New Game Plus, which is kind of a really big bummer. Whereas at least with Final Fantasy VII, and a lot more so with the original version, you get that little bit of flavor between what party members you currently have with you. So even though you're essentially doing the exact same thing, there is a little bit of a different colored lens on things, perhaps. And then Otoako, welcome back in. Gotta love some legendary weapons being unobtainable in Elden Ring if you didn't find it before the burning. Oh yeah, that's true too, huh? Feels bad, man. High page set.
I'm coming in.
Right after I check and see what's in here. The have to me speaks to a much larger issue in gaming, a perfectionistic tendency, that fear that a great many of us have of missing content.
Oh yeah, this actually ruined Ghost of Tsushima for me because, I think I've said this on stream before, but I did pretty much all of the side content that I could possibly do on, let's say, the first part of the world. And then after I cleared that out and then you get access to the second part of the world, there's a bunch of random crap that just spawns in the first part of the world without any real context for it, which makes it feel really arbitrary that I did things the way that I did, and that it would have been better had I just done the main story first and then ignored all that side content to begin with. And I don't know, by the time I got to the second part of the world, I just was perhaps a little bit burned out by having done all that side content, which is a little bit of a double whammy for me. So Ghost of Sushi is another game that I need to go back and actually like complete, but for real. Not complete as in get everything. I mean beat like the actual campaign or story or whatever you want to call it.
And it's one of the unique challenges that games face. If you read a book, there aren't really optional pages in the middle of the story, you just read in turn. In a movie, you're presented with everything the director intended for you to see, same with any TV show. Games are the form of storytelling that struggles the most with distracting you from its own story, simply because there is often a utility in going off the beaten path. And don't get me wrong, a lot of games are made to keep you endlessly distracted. Open world games bombard you with things to do that are only tangentially related to the plot. Most of the time when you exit a shrine in Zelda, the camera is perfectly lined up with something else to grab your interest. Towers tag your map with more errands to run. Other genres like Metroidvanias get around this by making exploration extremely necessary because of all the dead ends and by having stories that feel less pressing. But even when the story is not an issue, there is a pressure I think many of us feel when it comes to not wanting to miss anything or playing perfectly. And I don't just mean...
So, to build off this point, and he might get back to it a bit later, but after seeing the damn FF7 Ubisoft towers pop in, just like the disgust sets in, and like all my nostalgia for the original comes back rearing in full force. But before getting on that soapbox, I wanted to welcome in Biscuit Keyboard. Welcome to the stream. Nice to have you. I like the name. So you were saying for FF7 you can watch Advent Children after, and the new art style is the same as the movie. Honestly, the new art style is probably a little bit better at times, but they're pretty damn close when you mention it. So yeah, going back to the soapbox of like Final Fantasy VII and exploration. So completionism can tie into like trophies and whatnot, but for me, like a lot of the charm of like the earlier JRPGs was just kind of discovering a fully fleshed out world and seeing like what kind of personality characters and even regions or like towns and villagers had. So it's really silly, but honestly, like one of the biggest things which stood out to me in Final Fantasy VII is that the original game, at least, is that they actually had like bathrooms and toilets included into the game. And that was something that just kind of always stood out to me as a little bit awkward for RPGs before that point. It's like, okay, these people live in houses, but none of these houses have bathrooms. So like in the grand scheme of things, how much does this really matter for the narratives? Not at all, but there's just something about lacking plumbing or whatnot that just kind of breaks my immersion a lot. And so when you're in Final Fantasy VII the first time around and you go into the damn bar and you see somebody puking their guts out, I'm like, oh my god, they have toilets and they actually use them, or like stuff like that just kind of helps add a lot of personality, and it makes it easier for me to get immersed in that kind of game. So finding secret weapons and spells felt special. Yeah, and like there was a lot of incentive to do it just for the love of doing it. So it's like you're being rewarded while exploration in itself was already a bit of a reward for me. And of course, that does become its own serpent eating its tail, because then once you start to expect a reward for exploration instead of exploring for exploration's sake, then that incentivizes the devs to reward people. And then if you don't get rewarded, you feel cheated, or like the game is empty. And then we kind of get the whole Elden Ring experience where it's like the devs felt the need to include something in every area, but then we're almost at the point where the majority of things that they give you as rewards feel negligible and not really worth it. And so there's really not much incentive to go back and re-explore things. But to be fair, I don't feel as though you need to go back and visit every little piece or side place that you've seen before. And having some kind of reward attached to everything makes certain things feel a little bit more mandatory than they would if there was nothing at all. So for me, like going back in Final Fantasy VII and like piecing together like who Zack's parents are and where they are in like Gongaga Village was kind of its own reward. And it didn't necessarily have to come with an item. So yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I'll just get off my nostalgia box here for a moment and let's go back into it. I must have loved Skyward Sword. Actually, I never played that one, to be honest. I've heard not great things about that, so I also didn't feel compelled to pick it up. So I played Wind Waker and Twilight Princess and skipped that one. And I also haven't played Breath of the Wild and whatnot either.
folks that go for platinums or 100% runs. I mean, the fear of getting a bad ending because you skipped something, or not wanting to get locked out of certain missions or weapons or armor because you progressed too far in the story, or simply feeling like the game is dragging because you can't allow yourself to play suboptimally. And that's what I want to discuss with you today. I've got some psych research, some silly examples, and maybe, just maybe, a way for you to relieve some of that fear of missing out and perfectionism so that you can play without needing an ice pack. So if you don't mind, let's hear a quick word from today's sponsor, then we'll start the show. Have you ever been interested in coding, even a little bit? Back-end web development, Python, Go, programming, are those words you've ever heard in a classroom or punched into a Google search before? If so, I think you need to know about boot.dev. This platform uses modern game design tactics to help push ambitious students toward their goal, a career in back-end development.
Coding.
A career, by
well,
the
this
way,
has got to be legit. It's got the Chrono Trigger music.
Last year, netted a median salary of over $100,000. Which is well more than you make as a YouTuber. If you have the drive to become a back-end developer, this is the platform for you. You'll learn back-end development from start to finish in the Python and Go programming languages, and you'll do this a lot. It's designed to actually get you writing a ton of code because, as I understand it, getting your hands dirty and shipping projects is the only way to truly learn. What I think makes it special is that the folks at boot.dev want to ensure that you're never bored. It's designed like an RPG game to keep you engrossed in the learning process. You'll earn XP, levels, achievements, and complete quests, all while competing for a top spot on the global leaderboard. Imagine actually developing a marketable skill while you game instead of just doing it for funsies or for writing essays about them. Seriously, what the hell am I doing? So click the link in the description and use my code DarylTalksGames to get 25% off your first payment for boot.dev. That's 25% off your first month or your first year, depending on the subscription you choose. I'm gonna try it, and if I'm a natural, you may never see my ass again. A massive thanks to boot.dev for the sponsor. Now,
all right, we gotta check if he's released other videos since this one. All right, let's get out of full screen. I hate that for you section. Oh, we caught him. He's not a coding master. Anyway. Oops.
Back to the show. When I consider the art of the Hab, I think it really started for me.
Hold on. Dylan says he doesn't like how restrictive Skyward Sword was, but he actually likes Wind Waker. I actually hated Wind Waker because of how restrictive it felt to me. Like I said before, or like 1,000 times that, or he was laid off recently. Oh no. Thanks, Corn. Like I've said before, I like to explore way too much. So I tried to explore literally everywhere that I could with the damn boat in Wind Waker, and I hated the boat controls. It was just so slow, so tedious. And then you finally get to a new section of the map. Oh, there's a tornado here. Oh no. So then I like circumnavigate the damn flat globe to get 4 more tornadoes where I can't visit anything. Oh, there's a cool big island here. Nope, you can't climb up it for whatever reason unless you cheese it somehow that you need to know the secret for. And I just did not have a good time. For the majority of my gaming experience up until they like actually opened up the world to you. And at that point it was like, okay, but I really hated the ship mechanic in Wind Waker. You love the boat in Wind Waker, so that's probably the biggest difference. That really would be a big difference. And it's kind of funny because I did actually like Suikoden 4, which has a significant like boat component to it. You also waited to explore till after Hookshot, which helped a lot? Probably, yeah. All right, let's go back in.
Me personally back in 2010. I picked up Dead Space on a whim, my first real experience with survival horror. It had this little light room that you could just check at any time that would direct you to where you needed to go. And as time went on and I realized just how important ammo and health packs and weapon upgrades were in this genre, I started to check this rope to find out where not to go. I'd find myself with my path forward split, see what was the right way,
I feel it,
and then
yeah.
go the other way because I knew more nodes and credits and such were going to be the rewards for my bravery. Dead Space low-key cured my fear of the dark because of this. But it also created a habit that I haven't broken to this day. This need to check every nook and cranny around me first instead of just going the right direction. The game conditioned me to leave no stone unturned.
And yeah, that's definitely how I've felt with my long tenured experience playing JRPGs and like many other games up to this point as well, which you guys may or may not have seen in full swing with the Blasphemous playthroughs recently.
And I think this has happened to a great many seasoned gamers, even if it wasn't with Dead Space. Maybe it was Persona 4 where you got stuck with the bad ending because you didn't spend enough time with this fucker and his incredibly busy schedule. Yeah, you're real busy standing out here smoking a cigarette in front of the 7-Eleven. Maybe you've seen side quests interact with one another or affect the main narrative, and that's your blueprint for all future side quests in all future games you play. Can't miss those. Maybe you've been locked out of missions and items before because you advanced the story, and that scarred you so badly that you have to take to Reddit before you can keep going in what you're playing now. Maybe you 100%ed a game once, and now you truly can't go back to just playing them half-assed. Whatever your experience is, this might be the issue, that video games have taught us that just kind of moving on might come back to bite you. You don't want to be underprepared, feel like you need to save scum, or wonder what you missed out on by just being ready to progress already. But at the same time, so many of us struggle to finish games these days, and slowing your pace down to a halt to play it optimally doesn't help that. And when you pair this with the cognitive load of leaving things unfinished, it makes moving forward when you actually want to finish the game that much harder.
Honestly, one emotion that I've recognized myself experiencing when getting toward the end of video games is kind of wanting to stop playing it so that way they don't let me down, which I don't necessarily think like a game is going to implicitly let me down, but I just don't necessarily want things to get bungled to the point where it makes me end up hating a game that I like. And so this is probably something that's like working on me in a very like subconscious level, where there are a lot of games where I've gotten to like literally the final points in a game. I've just stopped playing for whatever reason. And there could be a number of factors to it. Maybe like parts of the game are like really annoying. Maybe the enemies are tougher there or something like that, or a number of things. But I've had to like force myself to go back and actually complete a number of games. So like I had to do that for Final Fantasy V, Final Fantasy VI, Final Fantasy VIII, Final Fantasy IX, although I didn't get to the ending like the first time around. I pretty much only did the first disc and a half, but then I went back and I like played through it entirely. So maybe this is a Final Fantasy problem more than a game problem, but yeah, I don't know. There's just something about that process to me that unless like a game is like super stellar where I can't stop myself from playing, there's a pretty big part of me that gets like more resistant to completing it the further I get on with it sometimes. I don't know if you guys have felt that at all either. Dylan said, not to what I said, but from something earlier, that's something they do in a lot of games. You always end games with thousands of unused items you never needed. Oh, probably like the super exploration. Yeah. I remember being in the final fight with Safer Sephiroth and hesitating on whether or not I should use a mega elixir, because it's like, I might need this later. And then I caught myself in the middle of having that thought. I'm like, later? There is no later. What are you doing? Just use the item. And I was still reticent to use it. When Titan gets close to the end, sometimes you get impatient and kind of rush. Do you know why that would be? It's just because you want to get it over with, or you're not enjoying yourself, or you just want to move on to the next thing? Oto does that all the time with the Mega Elixirs. Biscuit says, that might also be due to the rise in open world games, making it so you can avoid the ending. Trying to think. I could see what you mean by that, because I was trying to like think of what open world games where I've kind of experienced that. Because now that you mention it, I have not beaten any. Oh yeah, all of the Bethesda games I put off like doing the main quest as much as possible, and I had to force myself to go back and actually beat Fallout 3. But that's because of like the whole Ubisoft brain problem, where I want to explore absolutely everything that there is to do, and those games are just too damn big. I mean, it's kind of funny to say, but in many ways it's kind of true. So I burnt myself out on Fallout for having gone back and played through Fallout 3 completely. And then I haven't played New Vegas, which is on my list of things to do eventually. And then I only played like the very beginning of Fallout 4, but that's because I burned myself out on Fallout 3. And then I played I guess with Oblivion, I would have probably eventually beaten the game, except I ran into a bug for trying to keep the damn Cowl of the Grey Fox, and then the guards were pissed off at me no matter what I did, and then I didn't feel like figuring out the dev command to fix my game. So granted, I did like break the game to begin with, but I didn't break it the way that it was supposed to be, like the way that it actually broke. Anyway, it's not too important. Gigantosaurus, welcome back to the stream. How's it going? And yeah, the same thing with Skyrim. I've gotten to like level 69 or 72, or maybe it's like up to the 80s even. I had 24 shouts of power and I couldn't even use a damn one of them because I hadn't progressed the main story far enough to even use Fussroda. Titan wants to know how the games conclude. If you're keeping up with the story, you just want to kill the bad guy because you don't like them? Okay. Alright, let's go back in.
I've talked to you about the Zeigarnik effect on this channel a great many times now. I owe this lady so much ad revenue. But one thing I haven't really explained is why the Zeigarnik effect works. If this is your first time here, Bluma Zeigarnik once ran a study where she gave kids puzzles and interrupted half of them before they were finished and sent them all home. The kids that were interrupted remembered way more about their puzzle later than those who finished, the implication being unfinished tasks stay with us. Completed ones.
I would disagree with that, and one could make the argument that it's spaced repetition, and this is a really big thing in like learning a new language. It is much more effective for somebody to spend... Hold on, let me try to phrase this in a more accurate way. People who spend... Okay, so let's say we have two people who spend a total of 1 hour studying a new language every day. If one person studies 1 hour at a time, they're actually going to be scientifically less effective at remembering the details that they had studied than somebody who broke up studying their language into 5 or 10 minute chunks throughout the day due to spaced repetition. So she might be right about this. I'm sure, like, if this is an actually studied and falsified scientific effect, that there might be, like, some more basis to justify this, but there might also be some other components going on with this. But having said all that, the idea as a whole doesn't surprise me, because if I'm done with something, I'm more likely to not feel any utility to muse on it any further and push it out of mind. And so for me, like, I try to do this trick with myself in like eating better and like more healthy. So like if I don't buy snack food, I'm not going to be tempted to like eat a bunch of junk food. But conversely, if I buy like a lot of produce and like vegetables, I tend to have this whole like out of sight, out of mind phenomenon going on. So like if I buy baby carrots, but I don't leave like a couple baby carrots out for me during the day, I'm not going to eat them. So I just try to, you know, be a bit more mindful about that stuff and set myself up for more success and whatnot. So yeah, I'm doing pretty well. How about you? Minus the YouTube issues.
Fade away
Here we go.
peacefully. So ignoring the monkey on your shoulder and not smashing those boxes
I didn't have the closed captions on. My fault, guys.
just makes him even more unhinged. He doesn't let you forget it. And the reason this works like this, according to psychiatrist Roma Kumar, is because of short-term memory. In an interview with the Harvard Business Review, she says that once our brain receives information, it stores it in the sensory memory for a very brief time until it moves to the short-term memory. Many of these short-term memories are forgotten fairly quickly, but when a task isn't complete, our brains constantly rehearse it to keep the information active. Kind of like you would do a phone number when you're looking for a pen. That is what creates the underlying cognitive tension. Once we complete the task, the information is easily forgotten. That little bean on your shoulder is actually your short-term memory refusing to just forget that you might need that material you just passed, which creates this mental load. Until you resolve it, your short-term memory will be subtly replaying that moment over and over, calculating how long it would take to turn around, considering why you might need to go do it, contemplating the potential ramifications of not going back and saving the time that you'd waste later if you had what was there all along. Okay, fine. Damn.
Yeah, I feel like I am particularly bad at that compared to many other people where my mind is so like efficiency focused. Probably because I'm really lazy. So, if for example, I need to refill my dog's like water bowls and or their food bowls, I will try to minimize the amount of steps I need to take to get that process done. And so I will, or even not even just steps, I should also say like time. So if I'm like if I grab one dog's bowl, I could turn on the water, fill that dog's bowl up, and then while that's filling up, I can maximize my efficiency of time by walking to grab the other dog's dish and then grab that. And so maybe in the time that it takes to fill up one dog's bowl with water, I can put the other one down and back and like vice versa and like fill up food. Anyway, so I do that with pretty much everything. And so I do think that there is probably a big modicum of truth to this. But then one other thing that I was thinking of was like when I was playing Cave Story, I still couldn't stop myself from wanting to pick up all the damn experience Doritos, even though my weapon was at a max upgrade. So I'm like, what's the justification for that other than sometimes it's just fun to do that? I don't know. Have I heard or tried Tainted Grail, The Fall of Avalon? I've never heard of it. It's a Skyrim clone that's in early access right now. No, I have not. All right, let's go back in.
Damn, I'll go see what it is. Copy and paste this sensation to any side quest, any dialogue option you've ever save scummed to check, anything you've ever decided to skip in a game, and I think you know exactly what I mean. And as someone with occasional perfectionistic tendencies, I personally feel a small pang of this every time I come across a locked door or cabinet or chest, because as soon as I see it, I can't unsee it. It becomes a loose end that weighs me down. I know closing loops can be distracting, but story aside, I still struggle with the mental stack of trying not to forget I need to go back and unlock that at some point, unless I already missed the key somewhere. Fuck! My brain struggles with Metroidvanias because of this. I love them as a genre. Silksong will be a day one for me when it finally drops the same day my grandkids drop me off at the nursing home, but I do really have to be in the right frame of mind to play them. They're full of locked doors, blocked passageways, routes that are barred behind an ability I've yet to find. It's a delightful feeling to go back and finally close those loops, but this internal dissonance that is created when you are either forced or force yourself to leave something behind you is what is really under the hood of the hab. The weight of carrying unfulfilled exploration often outweighs the inconvenience of going to check it real quick, but we're still left with the frustration of not being able to tell ourselves no. So, what do we do about this? Is there a solution for us as gamers to not be so neurotic about checking everything? What can games do to keep that from happening to us? And in a word, I think the solution for both parties here is trust. Let me show you what I mean. The first 2 hours of Tears of the Kingdom were agonizing for me personally because of my fear of missing content. I was kicked out here, told to go here, and then I proceeded to wander around and interact with things that weren't ready to be interacted with yet. I couldn't make heads or tails of these rails, I was clearly missing a way to move the blocks here, and I didn't even know these were shrines yet, they hadn't been activated. This is a prime example of a time when I should have just listened to the game and followed that little blue rope. If I had done that first, then the shrines would have all been ready for me. I would have had access to the tools that interact with this place in the opening hours of the game.
Yeah, I feel like I would have done the exact same thing as this dude, if not maybe a little bit worse somehow. So I will try to keep this in mind if for whatever reason I do play this game eventually. Titan overcame this mindset when you realized you were getting in your own way of having fun. If you missed it, oh well, you had fun exploring the other place. If only it was that easy to come to that realization. Well, the thing is, like, you don't know what you're missing until you know you're missing it. And that's kind of one of the bigger issues of like following a game that's on rails, like Tears of the Kingdom, until it's no longer on rails. Like, how do you know you're at that point until you've already like crossed that threshold? Dylan says, you don't know what that means about you, but you've never felt burned out on Metroidvanias. So I was thinking about what Daryl was talking about a moment ago with like the Metroidvania burnouts and trying to remember like where locked doors were and keys. And for me, a lot of that pressure gets alleviated if you have map markers. So for me, like Blasphemous was really good because I was able to mark what exactly I was missing and where, and I had enough control over what markers I was using to help designate how these missable things were important to me, or like what they were in a more tangible way. So if a game lacks that, it becomes a lot more burdensome for me mentally, I suppose. Tears of the Kingdom isn't very punishing for pushing the story forward. Okay. Sometimes the game can be too punishing if you miss something. Yeah. Or like not even if it's punishing, just like the feeling of missing out can really suck. But sometimes that could also lead into replayability. So it's a little bit of a double-edged sword for me because like for me, I don't know how others would feel in going to Shinra Mansion and like encountering the safe that's locked. Maybe like, oh, well, this is locked. I must be able to learn how to open this later. And they just kind of go on their merry way and like they don't figure out that puzzle. But for me, it almost feels like I'm being rewarded for going out of my way and like interacting with the game in such a way to like figure this out. And I almost feel like I'm getting ahead of the game and being very clever, even though like the devs perfectly intended for this sequence of events to happen the way that they're working. And so fighting the damn lost number felt like at that point in the game, it almost feels like an end game boss for how tough it was. But yeah, like not only that, once you do get the lost number, which like that whole sequence in and of itself is cool as hell, you get rewarded with the Bahamut materia, or is that Bahamut Neo? One of the two Bahamuts, or maybe that one was Odin. I thought that was Odin originally. Or maybe I used Odin on him at times. Anyway, you get one of like the three coolest summons in the game to work with, and then like that whole sequence is just such a nice breakup of the normal flow of gameplay, even though you're still doing the core gameplay loop of like wandering around, getting into random battles, that it just helps elevate the game and push it in a new direction that enhances my experience overall, rather than just feeling like I'm missing out on content that I don't know exists. I don't know. It's kind of a different thing. So yeah. Hey Crunchy, how's it going? The more freedom the player has, the more they have to curate their own game experience. But first-time players are the worst suited to curate their experience because they don't know anything yet. Bro, that is such a really great way of putting it. I almost want to steal that from you. Like, you're a content creator. You should like take that quote and literally open up a video talking about games with that quote as it is, almost verbatim. Because that is beautifully said, my man. And welcome back into the stream. Older Metroidvanias may not have map markers, but you can generally still tell where you hit a locked door on the rudimentary maps from 20 years ago. Yeah, and Blasphemous was really good about that as well, where you could tell where like doors were based off of like the indentations on the map as well. Titan says, replayability is good, but the game cannot be too long. Replayability isn't so fun when you need to play 30 hours just to get a new weapon. And yeah, I would agree with that to an extent, that if I went to replay a game, it's mostly not entirely because I felt like I was missing something, as much as it is like looking at it as an opportunity to see something different or something that I missed, which in many ways is the exact same thing. But for me, I guess like the difference is looking at it from like a glass full versus glass empty perspective, perhaps, if that makes any sense.
Would have been delightful. So the solution here becomes a two-way street. One, I could have just done what the game said and headed right to the temple. Or two, the game could have just put me out here instead of here. It could have opened with me meeting Rauru and activating all the shrines. Then I couldn't have wasted 2 hours trying to optimize my time with the game. And this is what I mean by trust being the answer. I could have trusted that Zelda wasn't going to lock me out of all this area once I progressed the story. I could have trusted that it was okay not to fully explore the map before I went here, but so many games have taught me that it isn't okay. Games haven't built that trust with me, so I feel like all of my obsessive preparation is necessary, which can be exhausting. Now that being said, a lot of games do a really great job of being clear about this sort of thing. Hey, you won't be able to come back here for a while. Are you sure you want to continue? Hey, we're gonna paint these boxes and rock holes yellow and piss everyone off, but at least you'll know.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, sometimes to me that breaks the immersion, and then obviously like the yellow blocks are kind of egregious. I felt that way about Final Fantasy VII Rebirth as well, but I mean, at that point for me, it was like part and parcel with what everything else they were doing with exploration, and I was just really disappointed with exploration in that game in general, which was a really big bummer because that was like one of my favorite parts of the original. Anyway, Dylan said, you have an aunt that's horrible at games but will play them and love them even if she can't get past the opening act. That's kind of wild to me that you can't get past the opening act but would still love a game. I would feel kind of cheated, maybe, if I don't know. I'm too stubborn to be beaten by the opening level of a game, I think. Well, maybe, hold on. Maybe I wouldn't love a game that I couldn't beat the opening level of implicitly. But now I'm really curious at how your aunt plays games to like have that kind of feeling. Yeah, Oto says, broadly putting your trust across games as a whole is definitely detrimental. Much better to have trust be different across games and devs. And I agree with that, and I think that's the point Daryl is making as well. But going back to like what Crunchy was saying ago, first-time players are the worst suited to curate their experiences because they don't know anything yet. And I feel like that's a little bit unfair to say for like people who may not have like the most intimate relationship with each like individual game developer for the game that they're currently playing. Oh, Adlai says some people love the game despite not making that much progress, like with World of Warcraft. That one makes a lot more sense to me than like, I don't know, Gradius or something. Until they messed up the story. What time?
Which you can't break and won't waste time doing this. At least you know this particular rock formation isn't a loose end you have to close. Hey, you decided to go off the beaten path. Here's a room bursting at the seams with goodies and not one single common item at the end of a long hallway. Ladies and gentlemen.
So this is a bit of a double-edged sword, but I remember being disappointed in Final Fantasy X when all of the treasure boxes were like put on the map and there was no reason to just explore random like bookshelves and bookcases or tiles on the ground anymore because I don't know, like it just took, I don't want to say like immersion away because I wasn't necessarily immersed in the idea of like literally barging into every person in the world's house and like stealing their actual like goods and like rifling through their drawers and whatnot. But I do think it was kind of a nice way to get a little bit of lore exposition dumps when you like walk into a bookshelf and like examine it and then for whatever reason pieces of the game together for you. And I realize as I say this, it's a little bit of the monkey's paw curling as I speak because I simultaneously loved and hated items being hidden in random tiles in old games like Shining Force 2, like the Lucky Stirrups or whatever they're called. It's like 6 spaces away from like the King's Throne, just randomly, no reason that it's there, but it is. And so I guess like it really comes down to having to have an extra HUD portion on the screen to designate something that is lootable is something that I've kind of always disliked. So in Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, like the stupid herbs and spices on the ground having icons annoys me. And yeah, I don't know what the most elegant solution for that is. Elden Ring? I've got mixed feelings about Elden Ring. I wish like the crafting and the item economy was a little bit better in general. That's why roguelike and roguelike games are great. You're more able to curate your own experience and you'll have a familiar and new experience. That's true. And I guess I really do like a lot of roguelites as well. She can't escape the space station in Metroid Prime, but it's one of her favorite games. She just loves the vibe of it. That's wild, man. That's great. RPGs that don't have a single NPC note or note mentioning those hidden tiles are frustrating. Yeah, so maybe that's a good point that you bring up, Otto, that if there's something that can diegetically set that kind of system up as a mechanic, I'm totally for it and I can love it, even if at times it can be frustrating trying to find everything and kind of turn people to using guides, which I think can be bad. But if it's done well in a way that makes sense, it's just to me like the perfect blend of like mechanics and lore to work together. And he said Dragon Quest 1 has NPCs that tell you how to find a lot of hidden tile items. Right. So, okay, let's go back into ladies and gentlemen. If we can.
Gentlemen, did you miss out on your platinum? I present to you the chapter select screen. It's beautiful, I know. It's absolutely stunning. Yes, absolutely. Wait, don't lick it. What are you doing? So as far as games earning our trust that we will, 1, be rewarded for going off the beaten path, and 2, not be punished for not going off the beaten path, I think games these days are only improving and making it easier to not stress about missing anything. Obviously, some exceptions apply and maybe don't set you up for success. For the record, I still think Tears of the Kingdom is fantastic. I'm just incredible at ruining things for myself, but games these days are doing their best to keep me from doing that. That said, this whole trust thing is a two-way street, so how can we learn to trust games? How do we let go of the fear of missing content? We've talked a lot about how some older games might have conditioned us to play them a certain way, but what we haven't explored is our inability to just ignore these impulses. Sure, we know why they're there, but why can some of us ignore them where others can't? My guess is that a lot of this obsessive double-checking is rooted in what psychologists call maladaptive perfectionism, which in this context I think manifests in the desire to not necessarily play the game to have a good time, but to avoid having a bad time. Refusing to play in any fashion that is imperfect because it could lead to a disappointing experience. And while real-world perfectionism is something that does cause a lot of people very real issues, and if you genuinely struggle with it, don't be afraid to seek professional advice, I do think some of these strategies for combating it can be applied here. One common thread I keep finding in all of my research on perfectionism is this cognitive behavioral therapy technique of challenging those all or nothing thoughts. Your assumptions that you must play this optimally, or that you'll somehow have less fun if you don't unlock that legendary weapon or leave a side quest unfinished.
So this is making me wonder, because for me it's not necessarily avoiding a bad experience, because in many ways I gave myself a deliberately bad experience by going through Shadow of the Erdtree without using my Scooby-Doo blessings. But for me, exploring fully in many ways, as I've been saying, kind of enhances my fun. So even if I steamroll some bosses at times, there's kind of an enjoyment of like feeling like I'm way more powerful than I should be at times. But at least with Shadow of the Erdtree and the way that I played it, I did it a deliberate way, because a lot of my enjoyment in that game does come from like beating my head against the wall and trying to conquer the game on my terms, which is kind of where things fell off for me in my playthrough of like wanting to be blessingless and summonless. But I felt my reasons for that and breaking that kind of like ethos tended to be a bit more on a case-by-case basis, where I felt like I wasn't having the fun that I would have originally envisioned against many of the bosses with the kind of self-imposed rules that I had set for myself. So I was more okay with summoning against bosses like Gaius because of some like arbitrary reasons, or Baal, than I would have been satisfied at like having fought them mano a mano in my more like stubborn way. But even still, like I think there's probably something to what he's saying, but I don't think it's all encompassing. And I'm not trying to say that he thinks this is all encompassing either. So I'm just trying to figure out where my discrepancies lie. And I'm trying, I don't really think I have a good answer yet. Dylan says, there's a certain kind of freedom or relief they feel in a game that forces you to fail with no redos. It's something you liked about Dragon's Dogma, for example. There's a certain kind of freedom or relief in a game that forces you to fail with no redos. Could you elaborate on that? Because I'm not quite sure I follow. Because I've always felt a little bit cheated when that's happened. So in a game like Tales of Destiny, there's a point in the game where you kind of get confronted by the police and a major character that'll go on to become like a party member eventually. And canonically, you're supposed to lose that fight and get your ass kicked, but if for whatever reason you manage to grind yourself up to like hellishly high level, essentially, you can feasibly defeat the boss or like grind it out extremely slowly. And if you do that, you kind of get an alternate ending to the game, which I really love because it's just kind of goofy. Like, because it's essentially the dev saying, "Oh, you," and just kind of like rolling with it. And so I always hated that in a game like, I think Wild Arms 3. Wait, no, Wild Arms 3 kind of assumes you're going to lose certain battles, but you can win them, and they are slightly different. So never mind, maybe not so much Wild Arms 3. Dragon's Dogma is great for replayability because of that too. As you progress the story, certain quests fail. Oh, as you progress the story, certain quests fail. Okay, that makes more sense. Okay. The game has a new game plus system, so getting back to those points is even easier. It also has a lot of side quests that are only available between certain main story quests. Okay, that makes more sense to me. I understand what you're saying now. Thank you, guys. So, yeah, that is something that I enjoy as well. And to me, that can enhance replayability if it's done well, or can kill it all entirely. It just depends.
Sure, it'll be an unclosed loop, but is it really going to undo all of the fun you've...
Oh, Titan said, my statement earlier about not finishing some games because I was worried they might ruin the conclusion could apply here? Maybe.
Had up to this point. When you've finished this game and have uninstalled it, will you really still be thinking about that treasure room you never unlocked? Or will it simply be...
Oh, yeah, I guess Demon Souls works this way. Where if you defeat like the first boss, you still essentially like lose the fight in the long run because you still die and like nothing changes. So about how Dragon's Dogma starts with you losing a fight to a dragon, and if you do win it, you lose it anyway. Yeah, that kind of stuff has always annoyed me. So I'm gonna back this up a little bit if I can find it, and it's gonna like re-buffer.
Finished this game and have uninstalled it. Will you really?
Yep. Okay. Screw me, right?
Still be thinking about that treasure room you never unlocked? Or will it simply...
Why, YouTubes? Oh, it's probably because it's on auto again.
Simply be trivial since the ending blew you away.
I hate this.
Big plot twist is what you really remember. That boss fight was hype as hell.
I feel like they're trolling me.
And none of that treasure can come with you into the real world. It was all a means to an end after all, and you still beat the game, you still had fun. There was evidence supporting that from the last 20 games you've played. Maybe watching that other ending on YouTube is okay. Maybe you don't have to check everything before you head to that objective marker. Maybe it's okay to miss parts of the game. Another strategy is setting realistic goals, or purposely doing something wrong and not going for a 100% effort. It's setting a limit before you dive into a game. This will do a couple of things. It'll keep you on track, help you explore what it feels like to just do what you feel like, and perhaps give you more evidence that sometimes just beating a game is enough. Good enough is good enough. I know a lot of you watch Dr. K over on Healthy Gamer GG, and even he echoes this strategy.
So if you really want to overcome perfectionism, there are a couple things you have to do. The first is to focus on your actions instead of the outcomes. How much time am I willing to devote? And I'm going to devote that, and that's going to be like enough, right? So it's to really focus on the action instead of the outcome. Because the last thing that you'll remember for people who are perfectionistic is they get so caught up on the outcome that they can never get started.
If you haven't seen his videos, you really should. They're extremely helpful if you struggle with stuff like this outside of video games.
Yeah, I mean, Stella's saying you're having pauses in the stream. You don't know if that's my YouTube or you. So I'm having a lot of frame drops in the YouTube player itself. My stream has 0 frame drops. So it seems to be like a YouTube thing. But if there's something going on between like YouTube itself and you and interacting with my stream, that could also be a possibility. I don't know why it's so bad while I'm streaming. It's really infuriating. So anyway, going back to like the whole Dr. K angle, yeah, I will also agree that Dr. K is a really nice resource for people to learn more about like psychology and coping mechanisms for stress and stuff. And I do like quite a bit of the content that I've seen that he's done. And then going back to the whole perfectionism thing, I'm curious if for me this is more of an outcome thing, because I don't necessarily feel like I'm expecting something by going down corridors that lead to nowhere except for the main thing. I am being silent and I'm thinking. So I don't know if this is a perfectionism issue or just an issue of, I don't know how to phrase this. Not being content if I don't know something, which, you know, big surprise, a lore hunter won't be content if they don't know all the ins and outs of things. So for me, I kind of want to know like what everything is before I feel like I can progress at times, because of the FOMO that I can get if I accidentally go down the right path and then the story moves on and you get teleported to a new zone, or there's things that you permanently miss because of stuff like that. And in many ways, like that behavior is certainly unnatural, and it can annoy me and affect my enjoyment of a game like Final Fantasy 16, where I stopped doing the main quest because I have side quests to do, and I have no idea when I'll be like blocked off by the story, or like when a natural point will arise for me to like do those side quests. But it also doesn't help that in games like Final Fantasy VII Rebirth and 16, there's like some reward structures attached to those side quests to make you want to do them as soon as possible, whether or not that's like character relationship improvements or like crafting items that you would get from doing the side quests. So I do think this is a truly multi-pronged issue that's kind of hard to grapple with. And so, do you need those things to beat and enjoy the game? No. And there can be an argument that I might enjoy the game more if I don't interface with all of these tertiary systems or secondary systems, because I would enjoy the challenge of doing things at a lower level more. I think that's a real possibility, because when I was having the most fun with Final Fantasy 16, it's when I was doing like side quests that were 10 levels above where I was in the game. But would I have even enjoyed those side quests at that point had I gone back to them at a later level? I don't know. Probably not. So, yeah, I don't know. So Adlies has had 2 pauses as well. Okay. You don't think it's perfectionism? It's just being careful and detailed? I'd hate Final Fantasy 15. It's true. I do hate Final Fantasy 15, but not for like that reason. Well, I didn't like, the Final Fantasy 15 issue runs deep. I did not like combat in 15. The story was not great, which is a really big deal for me. And then I didn't like how the job side quest board, you could only take one mission on at a time in, what was it, like 2018 when that game came out? Like, that's just unforgivable. So anyway. Luckily, FF16 side quests are pretty fast, not as numerous as a lot of open world RPGs out there. So the thing is, I did like a lot of the FF16 side quests at first, but then I realized like how very linear they were and how inconsequential they were. And then towards the end of the game, they just kind of felt too side questy and they weren't rewarding enough. With the exception for how they started to tie loose ends of the story together, I did enjoy. So, bit of good and bad with them. So, like, it wasn't all entirely a bad game by any means. I think it was pretty decent, but I just wanted better, I guess.
Games. But yeah, maybe you decide ahead of time that this is not going to be your 100% run, but instead that this is going to be your do what actually sounds fun run. If a quest doesn't appeal to you because it has a minigame that makes picking mushrooms as stressful as taking the bar exam,
Your Honor, I object.
That was pretty
skip
bad,
it.
yeah.
If getting a particular set of armor feels like more of a time commitment than you're willing to give, you don't have to explain yourself, just move on.
But to be fair, I feel like for me in some games, like having done all that crap content on the first run actually allows me the freedom to have the fun run the second time around. So this almost feels like moving the zero around where I could have more fun if I suffer a little bit to begin with, or I could have more fun now and then suffer later if I wanted to like complete things. But yeah. What's my worst experience of missing an item or something by not exploring? I'd really need to think about what the worst was. Because, I mean, in many ways, it's not like that drastic where I might want to reset a game. Oh, well, hold on. This might not be fair, but no, this does not exactly fit the criterion of your question. But when I played Final Fantasy Tactics the first time, I didn't know how to change my job. And I got up to Gafgarian, and then after that fight with Gafgarian, which is ridiculously difficult if you have a party of squires, I just noticed like the job change function in the menu, and I just felt so damn stupid and oblivious that I just stopped playing the game and I just restarted and played a new save file to try to rectify for that. So that's like not entirely it, but let me think of missing an item or something by not exploring, which sucked the most. Like some of it is just like a personal thing. It's like, would I have wanted this thing to begin with? Or I'm trying to think if there's something which ruined a run and like made me need to like replay the entire game by not getting it. I think that happened in old games like Ultima, where if you missed something, you pretty much just got a really bad... Oh, Page Master? That's another game that happened where like if you skipped any level in the game and you beat the game, the end screen just called you a cheater over and over. It's like, you beat the game, but you didn't actually beat the game. You're a cheater, something like that. And that felt really bad because I was like 9 years old or whatnot. Yeah, I don't know. Beating Bloodborne the first time and going arcane and never finding a single arcane trick weapon. That's a good one. Oh, man. No, Hokai, welcome on in. In DS3, you wanted the onion guy, but he died. You felt bad, so you put that run down. You didn't have fun after that. You forgot Siegmeyer's name. It's all right, man. We figured out who you're talking about. Titan has a habit of starting a game, doing a bit, and then your second character will be your main. I don't know if I really start games twice too often. I feel like I have to screw up, or I need to feel like enough impetus to want to do things extremely differently for something like that. Trying to think if I had that experience with Dark Souls. I certainly did with Dark Souls 1. I think I attacked the Crestfallen Knight and then he got pissed off and beat the crap out of me. And I was like, oh God, what have I done now? And so, I mean, it is kind of funny that that can happen in Dark Souls, and it's really hard to fix it in that game, which is both like a good and a bad thing. Good in the fact that it's cosmically funny, but bad for like the new player experience in many ways. So Dark Souls might be a game where like if you miss something or accidentally hit an NPC, you're just kind of boned. So I guess that's not the fear of missing out. Well, actually, okay, you know what? I kind of bricked my first Dark Souls character due to my fear of missing out on like a cool weapon or like a cool playstyle, because I was putting all of my points spread out into everything because I wanted to see what everything was. And that kind of ruined my very first playthrough, because having a character that has like 15 stats and everything when you're trying to fight Ornstein and Smo is not going to lead to a good time, you know? So yeah, that's probably an inverse case of FOMO, where it bites you in the ass, where you're not actually missing anything, but because you're trying to explore so much, you just kind of screw yourself in the process. Good question, though.
Missing content should never paralyze you into a game feeling like a chore, especially since leaving certain stones unturned adds crazy replay value when you decide to play it again down the line. Apparently, I missed an entire dungeon in Tears of the Kingdom.
And yeah, I would say like being able to miss like the true ending, I guess, for like games like Blasphemous 1, or depending on like the sequence of events you do things, could also impact that feeling. So, I mean, it was all a fluke that I managed to get like Perpetua defeated on my first run and like explore the map in such a way where I could unlock Ending C or whatever it's called in that game. So I don't necessarily know if I would have felt like FOMO, because sometimes that's a good thing, because that's kind of how I experienced Cave Story. And once I beat the game, I like learned you could go and like actually save Curly Brace, and then like learning about Hell or the Bloodstained Sanctuary just kind of elevated my love for that game, which was already pretty good. So yeah, I don't know. Pausing so much for this video.
Initially, it bothered me when I found out after I rolled credits, but I was able to combat those feelings with the realization that I still unmistakably had a tremendous time with the game, and the knowledge that in 2 or 3 years when I go back to replay it, there is so much more to discover. And these strategies are sort of how I've healed from the butterfly effect of Dead Space's light rope. I try as best I can to just go with the flow when I play. I accept that missing stuff is a natural part of the journey. Mistakes and oversights should happen. The decisions I make should have consequences. And I've said it before, but I refuse to optimize the fun out of my time anymore.
And I do think that there is a really big difference between the way that Dead Space gives you that glowing trail to the like canon event that you need to do, and for me that would be like game breaking in terms of my immersion into the world and how I would like to interact with it. And that is one thing that I do kind of dislike about a lot of modern games, which I think is part of the reason why Dark Souls and the Soulsborne genre has gained so much traction, is because they have stopped holding the player's hands and treating them more as adults that are capable of making mistakes and learning from them, hopefully. So yeah, I do think that is a pretty big difference between some design approaches in games.
Habs still happen, I'm sure they always will, but the monkey on my shoulder is much less of an asshole now. I named him Cecil. He even showed up in a video once. All that to say, I hope that if you're like me and you struggle with content FOMO or have been burned by games communicating poorly in the past, that you heal from that. And that you've discovered how a walkthrough can prevent a lot of headaches. And if you struggle with perfectionism in any form during your time on this planet, that you consider applying some of these strategies. Sometimes squeezing the most out of life means letting...
All right, well, that wasn't me. The game or the stream is stuttering. So anyway, I still kind of should go back and figure out to me what the difference was between P4 Golden and P5 Base and Royal, because I actually played through all of Persona 4 Golden and I beat the game, and then I even played New Game Plus like unprompted, and then like completed everything I possibly could do Whereas I felt too overwhelmed by all the random crap going on in Persona 5 and the absolute difference in the pacing of the game that I just kind of dropped it after 40 or 50 hours. So, after like beating the tutorial essentially. And I haven't really felt the desire to go back to Persona 5, partially because I did see a friend streaming it and I saw like a good chunk of the game, and I felt the exact same things, only more exacerbated because I wasn't the one in control of the game at that point, with just how much of a time difference there was between like doing the battles, the dialogue, and then like the daily life type grind stuff. And why does P5 feel so much more prohibitive to me than P4 Golden? I should try to figure that out sometimes. Golden adds new characters and side chapters. Royal does the same thing, same with some quality of life. Right, but I mean, I don't remember exactly how different P4 was from P5, but I didn't feel overwhelmed with like the min-maxing of my character stats and like the relationships and balancing all that stuff in that game compared to 5, and like taking a part-time job and studying for school, I guess.
Go of the outcomes and the illusion of control you have over them, and instead focusing on what's realistic, allowing your efforts to just be enough, noticing what is right in front of you, loving who is right in front of you, especially if that person is in the mirror. So rest your ankles, go make friends with your diaper monkey, and go half-ass something. Hello, dearest friend. Thank you for watching this video today. If you like this and want to see more videos like it, that lovely subscribe button will make sure you stay up to date on everything I make. And if you just love this and can't get enough, my Patreon page is the place for you. For $1 a month, you'll get weekly bonus content like creative input, bloopers, thumbnail previews, editing live streams, etc., etc., link in the description. You might even get a shout out like this month's featured patrons: Dempsey K. Tapley, Rifter, Snake, Paul Wright, Neon Puma, Decudo, LTNX9, and Osiek RC. Thanks again for watching. Like, share, subscribe, comment your perfectionistic tendencies down below, and as always, please have yourself a damn good one.
Oh no, not the other tail. It'd be cool if this is at more than 4 FPS. May 18th, okay.
The word of the door.
Okay, so that was it.
There's a phenomenon.
So that was a great video. I don't know if I've come along with like a fully conclusive idea of like my own perfectionistic tendencies, but I really do enjoy having the kind of spotlight and the space to even talk and consider this kind of thing from, a pretty casual perspective. It has made me rethink some of my tendencies in games, and I'm trying to grapple with like how much of this is perfectionistic versus FOMO, which ties to perfectionism to a degree, versus like just the love of exploration in general. So it might not be quite a one-size-fits-all kind of deal, which is kind of fun and a little bit frustrating to try to parse. But anyway, yeah, Dylan liked the video. There's a lot of angles to think about on a topic like that. Yeah. So I don't think he could have covered everything, but, for a 20-minute video, he certainly did a good job covering quite a range of focuses, I think, here. So, oh yeah, I guess I just auto piloted sharing that with you guys. So yeah, wait, no, that was the last video I did. Wait, no, this is this one. All right, so I've already shared it in chat if you guys want to give Daryl Talks Games some more support as well. 379k views, that's awesome. He had a lot of patrons. I'm a little bit jealous, but it's all well and good. I'm like, man, I really need to figure out my social media strategy to make that a bit work more in my favor sometimes. But I don't know. I am thinking about changing some of the focuses of my channel in the near future. So I've kind of got a script mostly ready that's going to talk about like the liar paradox. And I'm thinking of potentially shifting into talking more philosophy at times, which is kind of a bit of a, I don't want to say like a scary transition, but the current focus of my channel being like more on the games and translation and stuff like that. I don't necessarily want to alienate the audience that I already have, which I mean, to me, that's not actually the real focus, but like, as far as like my Discord goes, I do have a pretty much like no politics and philosophy type rule going on because those kind of discussions typically don't end well. And I don't know if I actually really want to open that can of worms, depending on how deeply I go into those topics. I feel like the liar paradox is pretty straightforward and non-controversial, but if I delve into harder topics, I could see things going a completely different way. But with that being said, I have kind of always valued my own independence as a content creator and being too lazy to like make different channels for stuff like that. So I'm still trying to like figure that out as far as that stuff goes. I don't even remember why I brought this up, but anyway, do I know that I had Celebi twice in my supporter slide? You'll have to show me tonight without horns, because I don't think you're right anymore. Anyway, yeah. So philosophy can lead all sorts of places depending on how you want to go about it. Yeah, I mean, I would tackle a lot of, controversial things, because what isn't controversial in philosophy? Yeah. So with all that being said, Levo, you are still in the stream, and it took me a lot more time to react to these kind of videos than I thought I would, because sometimes I just get off on tangents. Do you want me to continue to watch your video tonight? Because I know you said you're going to try to stay up, and I am willing to do that because I told you that I'd watch this tonight. But if you want, we could watch this like first tomorrow or something. So I'll just kind of like leave this up to you, and you don't have to feel pressure to feel a certain kind of way about this. So we can do it tomorrow. Are you sure? Because I feel a little bit bad for like being like, hey man, I'm going to watch this tonight. And then I spent a lot more time on other things than I anticipated. Okay, you went to sleep so bad? Okay, that's perfectly fine. I don't want to keep you up more than I already have. So I apologize for not getting to your video tonight, but I will certainly watch this one first tomorrow then. So thank you once again for joining, by the way. So ironically enough, this is actually like the 3-hour mark, pretty much right on the button. So I think this will be a good time for end tonight's stream, since I will postpone Levo's video about the poop eater for tomorrow. So we have that to look forward to. Okay, sweet. Thank you. I appreciate that. So, okay, folks, we'll be ending the stream tonight, but we'll be going in again live at 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time as usual. So until then, take care, stay safe. Last Protagonist out.